my boy.
Congratulations on finishing your chemo.
Thank you very much. It's a relief.
Yes,
it's a big relief. 420 pills, I was telling you. Fucking hell, mate. You try swallowing that lot, and that's 3 months, right?
Yeah.
Of this accumulation, and what the doctors are talking about is keep the intensity up, right? So that it fucks those cancer cells, so that they can operate on me probably. If they're feeling optimistic, right, I'm in bad trouble because, right, if they think they can cure you, they really fuck you up more, right? What they do is they go for it, and so they give you, you know. So in a way, you know, that would be a worry, but I'll get over that. And anyway, I don't think I'm dying at the moment, which is ideal, of course.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, you've had amazing energy all through the summer and since your original diagnosis. So that's been really nice for all of us. Yeah. And made it a lot easier as well.
Thank you. Thank you.
But yeah, obviously when you had your diagnosis, we thought it'd be good to get some of your anecdotes.
Oh my God. You've heard them often enough.
I know. Well, we've
got
a system now, haven't we?
I say that.
We do hand for how many times.
Yeah, that's right.
We've heard.
And actually, I've told a lot of people, right, of my vintage, right, and other younger people, I've said about that technique, I've said, if you repeat yourself, ask your family and friends to put one finger up for each time, because...
What happens when you run out of fingers and you go into double digits?
Oh, no, it won't happen because my embarrassment level will get beyond the limit.
You can't get beyond
3. Look, I'm going to give you a triple V sign here. No, my dear boy.
Right, so I'm going to go, because we've got a lot of questions to go through.
Exactly.
You've lived quite a life. And do you want to go in chronological order? Because the stuff in your early life, your childhood memories...
I mean, or put it in chronological order afterwards. It's up to you.
Yeah, well, it's probably a slightly longer list of questions than childhood memories, but if you're happy to start there, we can start there.
Well, we're going to start somewhere, and let's start at the beginning. Okay. In the
beginning of time, born on 23rd of February 1951.
Yeah.
So the first question I've got is, can you describe what life was like for you before the Lakonia disaster?
Right.
What are your fondest memories of your family before that event?
That's why I'm still happy to this day, is that I had a really happy time with your grandmother you didn't know. And she was a fantastic woman, my mother. And what she did, of course, what good mothers do, and Janet did and everything, she gave me what was necessary for everybody really, which is a dose of completely unconditional love. You know, I'm sure Janet, Mum gave you that all as well. I tried to. I didn't really, did I? But there we go. And so, yes, it was fantastic before the Lakonia thing, actually. And because it happened when I was 12, right? It was probably the best year for it to have happened, right? With the accident when my mother actually died, because I was kind of just at the point where I was early adolescence and just breaking away a little bit. And although, and also, I mean, people talk about survivor guilt, right? And although I love my mother, I've not got survivor guilt because I was so euphoric about not dying myself, you know. So I can describe, anyway, the early bit is what you're asking about.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm going to come on to talk about Lakonia a little bit more and how that affected you, but it'll be interesting if you have, as well as your memories of your mum, if you've got any. Obviously your father died when you were 2 years old,
right?
So if you got
1 year, I think,
1 year,
probably. I don't know.
That was a standard hospital procedure that went wrong.
It was another accident, in effect, you know. And I think
But if you've got any stories about
I will.
your dad's life or his personality.
Okay. So I never did. Obviously, he died when I was 1 or 2 or whatever. I didn't know him, right? But I know some anecdotes about him. So this is all I know about your grandfather, Eldon Potter, right? One fact, he managed somehow or other he got into the war. And he was slightly old. He was in his 30s at the beginning of the war, and he wanted to get into the RAF, and he got into the RAF. Quite a struggle. And then apparently, the only thing I know about his career in the war is that he managed to bomb Glasgow by mistake. Right? No, it was the whole team. He was probably on a bomber. He wasn't the pilot. But the people, White Eagle, which was one, did actually do that, which I really, really admire.
Well, I knew this story, but I didn't realise it was Eldon Potter. I didn't realise it was my granddad, your dad.
Yeah.
I thought it was like
your great uncle, Derrick Potter, right?
Oh, right.
I was named after him. I would rather have had my first name as Eldon. Yeah. Because I don't like Derrick, obviously. Yeah. And basically, he also died.
The Don in Spanish.
Yeah. I'll tell you quickly about him. He died in the war of a ricocheted bullet.
Yes. Well, I've got a whole other question about. I'll come on to it now.
Shall I finish off
we'll go back to your dad because a lot of your family died in extreme and I guess now hilarious circumstances.
It is hilarious. Can I just get my vape?
Yeah.
Did you see where it is? Oh shit. It's all right. I forget it for a minute. Right. So go
on. So we'll come back onto your dad in a sec, but yeah. So, your grandmother died in the cinema, but your mum was too proud to tell it.
Yes, that's a very good description of the mentality of the late 40s, 50s. This is how she reacted. Right, so she's in a cinema, as everybody went to cinema several times a week, if they could, in those days. So you're almost where you lived, which was your second home, in the big Odeons, I mean, they were dream factories for the... And so she's in the cinema with her grandmother, my great-grandmother, your great-great-grandmother, I think. Right? And then she apparently was a woman of who kind of liked cowboy and Indian films, right? And she always supported the cowboys. And apparently she used to sort of do a bit of cheering. And anyway, halfway through the cheering on of the cowboys to kill the Indians, as you do, she just died, right? She was just had a heart attack. Yeah. Probably, I don't know. But she was just rigid, in the seat next to
like cheering on the cowboys too.
Yeah. And then suddenly, that's right. It was fantastic. And so this is the interesting bit though. So my mum is sitting next to her and she's died. Nowadays, you make a big rumpus about it straight away. You stop the film. The whole thing will be fucked up for everybody else. Not in those days. She got into her head to leave her grandmother rigid next to her until the end of the film. So no one else would miss the film, right? That's what you used to do in those days. That's the mentality. That's a war mentality. Everybody's dying around you, so big deal. Die of an accident 10 years later, my father did, or my mother it was like when I had the accident, when we had the shipwreck, it was still going, that mentality was still going. Because what was happening was most of the adults around me had been in the war, right? So they were very nice to me afterwards. It wasn't that I wasn't getting sympathy, but there was a slight element of buck up about it afterwards. Not straight away, it's just not quite that. It's like, right, it's happened, we're going to look after you, and let's all get over it quite quickly, as we used to in the war when everybody died. You know, I mean, that's how they did things. So that's really interesting about the zeitgeist of that particular period for you, I think, because I'm really keen on the 50s. One, because I had this wonderful relationship with my mother. I was the favourite. And anyway, I just thought of myself as, you know, an only child, and that will bring us on to my sisters, but I'm not going to talk much about that because I don't know them anymore.
Well, we're going to go into all this in a lot more depth. Yeah. It is really interesting. Do you want to find your vape?
Yeah, do you want to stop it for a tick? No, you don't need to stop. Yeah, it's there. Done.
Okay.
Done deal.
Done deal. Just whilst we're on the subject, so obviously your grandmother or your great grandmother died in cinema. Mm-hmm. Also, I've got a note that maybe possibly your uncle, your great uncle, died by an unfortunate ricochet bullet.
Yeah, I've just told you that again.
Did you?
I mentioned it earlier on, yeah.
Oh, sorry.
So that's another accident. It's not an...
And then was that your uncle?
That was Derrick, my namesake.
Okay.
I was named after him.
So Derrick died by an unfortunate ricochet, but was it his own bullet that he fired?
Yeah, Derrick the first did, yeah. Well, I don't know the details, but it was in the war, you can imagine, they're fighting. But the ricochet thing is wonderful because it's another, chance occurrence. It's not a direct hit. You know,
that's very something that something would happen as soap to a director.
I think that would interest you, that idea. You know.
Well, and it'd be good to get a little bit more detail on your dad and how he accidentally bombed Glasgow. So was he supposed to be flying somewhere else? You know.
No, all I know about it was all the tall adults around me would talk about him, and they would talk about him. I tell you what, my mother was like bored with everybody else afterwards, right? He was obviously a very animated, very personable, very popular, and he was a...
Well, I guess it was quite commonplace to be in the army or the RAF.
But so also he was very...
big characters.
We were all very...
do, but...
Yeah, sorry. What did you say?
I'm just trying to get a sense of if your dad had similar personality traits to you, even though he was a man in the RAF.
I suspect so. Yeah. I think I probably got a combination of their two personalities. Yeah, which is.
And what would you say your mum's personality is more?
She was amazing, actually. She was like very loving, and she was really into me, which kind of ups her in my opinion generally. And
you were the youngest of three.
I was the youngest, yeah.
So I'm opposite to you because I'm the oldest, and the younger ones than me are twins, and the older ones than me are twins.
You've got the features you've got the profile of the oldest.
And I'm the favourite.
Oh yes, that's a leading one, but I mean, it's not.
I'll take your first answer.
Within a range of three, you're definitely one of my favourites. In fact, you were certainly when
you're in the middle places.
When you were born, I mean, about a week after you were born, Will, I can remember looking into the pram and thinking, fucking hell, I've fallen in love with this man with this baby, right? And that was a fantastic feeling for me. I mean, obviously Janet was expecting that to happen, being the mother, so she was already there. But it took me about 2 weeks to realise, I mean, the birth was amazing, and seeing Janet with you in the hospital, and she's looking kind of very, very happy, but really bleached out by the whole experience. And then there's you, the baby there. And believe you me, that kind of gave you the advantage of Artie and Dilly because they came after.
So you realise this is on camera, Dad?
Yeah, I know, but that's okay. That explains. No. For a while, you were my absolute favourite because you came first. Then slowly but surely, assuaging my guilt about the whole thing, you became all equally loved, obviously. you know, but they just, you know, it came later. And also they came in crisis, you know. So you were in the fucking hospital with this weirdo thing.
I was loved for 2 more years than Artie and Dillis, just to be clear.
Thank you for being greedy for my love. Right? You can have as much of it as you fucking like.
Okay, we'll come back onto your later life, but
so self-important being interviewed by you. I'm really enjoying it.
Yeah, that's good. Well, you're only on question 4.
Oh yeah, but that's how many have you got? Millions or?
I've got about 40.
Yeah, well that's nothing. We can do a lot of that.
Yeah.
Cheers.
I'm sure you got a few anecdotes. Well, cheers. And Mum pointed out that it's 100 days till Christmas today. 16th,
Is it?
16th September 2024, 100 days exactly till Christmas. But yeah, Lakonia happened just leading up to Christmas, didn't it? The cruise that you and your family went on. You went on December 21st.
I think 23rd. I think it was the day.
I think that's the day that the crash was.
Yeah, so you've checked it out.
I imagine you set off slightly before that, but it was sort of a Christmas cruise, wasn't it? And it was when you were 12 years old, so it must have been about 1963, of December 1963.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think everyone knows that story. So it would be good to know, are you able to share any specific information about the cruise that we might sort of not know? Which family members went along with you?
Yeah.
How long had you been out on sea? And did you enjoy it as a 12-year-old boy?
No.
I'll ask you the final question, but I can repeat these as well.
I've got it.
Do you have any specific memories about the fire, making your choices
narrative
for safety, and how long this took?
So what was that last phrase?
So the last bit, I can repeat these questions if you don't come to it, but do you have any specific memories about the fire, making a choice to swim to safety, and how long this took you?
Yeah, right, okay, this is the answer, right? This is the events. So on that night, it was a lot of parties going on, right? But I went to bed fairly early, and my mother woke me up and said, there's a problem, you know, there's a fire. So I got up and we went onto the deck, and we were there with my sisters, and my grandmother's unfortunately died before even getting onto a lifeboat, right? But you know, the crew was panicking, which was a real problem, right? And they were trying to get into the lifeboats at the same time as us. So my mother, who was wearing a fur coat, right, because it was cold, and me and my sisters got into the same lifeboat. The lifeboats are wildly oversubscribed because it was a rust bucket, the whole thing, the lifeboats and the ship and everything. So we got into it, but because they were fucked up, the lifeboats, excuse my French, because they were rusty, right? When it was lowered, right, into the water next to the ship, right, we're in it, okay? They couldn't free the ropes from the ship because they were stuck. They're called the painters, apparently, those ropes. And they were stuck so that they couldn't detach the lifeboat to get away from the ship. So the lifeboat started banging against the side of the ship, right? And it filled up with water and just flooded us all off.
Right, and you were still in it, but at that point.
There was all these people in it. It was an apocalyptic scene.
You were in that boat with your sisters,
that's what I'm talking about.
Your mum, but you were with the rest of your family.
I was with the rest of my family, but they all got whooshed off, and I never saw them. Right. So my mother, who had that fur coat on, probably drowned. Well, she did drown. She probably drowned because she had the fur coat on. I don't know, but she drowned. I told you my 2 grandmothers and a great aunt, Auntie Gertie.
Oh, right. Yeah.
You
had 2 grandmothers. One of your grandmother had died.
Yeah, they were both on board then.
Right.
They were maternal, my father's mother was on there. She was very elderly, and we called one granny and one grandma. Right. And the granny, they were there was a posh side, which was mainly my father's side. Anyway, so, right, I'm then in the water, right? And I'm only 12, so I don't have the sense, right, to think, help would be coming, don't get cramp, stay near the and stay away from the ship, because the ship could sink and drag you in, right? All those things that I would have realised even at 16, right? I didn't realise at 12. So I was doing the wrong things. Well, for a start, I was panicking and screaming for assistance.
Yeah, I bet.
But what happened was, I drifted away on my own, right? And the ship was still moving. It was like it was going away, and I wanted to keep near it, but I couldn't. I hadn't got a life jacket on. Nobody had life jackets, right? So I was just in the Atlantic on my own, 300 miles away from Madeira, or 200 miles, and basically really, really terrified, but not for long, because it just went on for about me being on my own without any adults in the vicinity, right? I mean, that was the thing. The adult world had left me, right? And I was very, very frightened about that. Obviously, I thought I was going to, I didn't think about drowning, but I would have drowned quite quickly. It was quite warm.
Must be quite cold.
No, it wasn't. It was good. That side of it was good. It was quite calm and it was quite warm, right? It was obviously nighttime, so it was dark, right? So it's a very isolating experience, right? Obviously, and I was certainly completely terrified, but it only went on for about 10 minutes or a quarter an hour with this being on my own in the ocean. Right. Then, when I thought I was lost, right? Well, I was lost. I heard this lapping noise, right? And it was another lifeboat full of adults drifting in the same direction as me. And I suddenly realised that I was saved.
Wow.
All I had to do was get into the fucking lifeboat. Wow. And then the adult world was there, and it was calm, and then it was quite clear they were all going to pick us up the following day. All the ships in the area were kind of steaming towards us to, to help us, as they do. And probably some, I don't know about aircraft, but anyway, there was a lot of lifeboats there. And then I got into the lifeboat, and I can remember saying, "Thank you, God," and all this kind of thing, and climbing into it. There was a load of adults there. All I had to do was sit and wait for it to be picked up by a boat called the Arcadia, which I'd been on a cruise on before, which was the same Greek line as the Lakonia, right? And basically, it happened to be coming towards England with a shed load. Well, the passengers were all English people who tried to settle in Australia. They were given £5 to emigrate to Australia. Big opportunity, if you were a plumber in England and shitty after post-war England, you could go, you were being offered to go to the New World, they were offered to go to Australia. But this mob, right, were some of the people who couldn't take it. They were homesick and they came straight back, right? So that was who was on the ship that I was saved on when we came back, right, to Southampton. So anyway, after that's the end of the narrative about that. Because it all goes right after that.
Yeah, well,
except for the fact.
So when you were taken to shore,
right? No, that's an interesting bit.
Do you have any memories?
Yeah. Sorry, that's part of it. So we got picked up by the Arcadia, taken to Funchal Harbour in Madeira, and then there we were, and it was Christmas time, obviously, right? Within 2 days. And we were put up in a hotel, fine. The downer every day was the fact that we would look at the list of survivors, right? And my mother's name didn't appear on it. So it was a gradual awareness that she was dead, definitely.
How come your sisters didn't come along on the cruise?
They did. They were there. They were on the boat. I just told you.
Sorry.
Yeah.
They also got on.
They survived, and they got on. They ended.
But did they get picked up by the same boat or not?
No, we'd all been whooshed off. My mother had drowned. They'd gone in another direction. They, like me, were quite good swimmers,
yeah.
right? So they
got picked up by another boat.
I was on my own. Then they got picked up by another lifeboat.
Right.
And I re-met them.
It was quite fortunate considering it was completely pitch black and you both floated.
Well, it was because it was pitch black that all that happened. You know, that confusion was.
Yeah, but I mean, for you to both separately get picked up by lifeboats who were passing.
I think it was, but the only reason people died on that night, the only reason, was that the crew had panicked and they were trying to get on the same lifeboats, right? And basically, they were flipping their lid, and they were even managing to kill themselves by panicking.
So you had, when you got to shore, you met up with your sisters.
Right. So we're now in Madeira, right?
Yeah.
Christmas time, and unfortunately, the downer each day, a gradual awareness that my mum and my grandmothers and my great aunt. Not that I was thinking about them. I was thinking about my mum. Hadn't survived, and that's who I wanted to survive.
Yeah.
Right? When I was on the lifeboat on my own, I was thinking, I hope my mother survived, and this is terrible. I become an only child if my sisters have died.
Yeah.
And that's what I wanted to happen. But the people who survived were my sisters, my grandfather, and some friends of his.
Did your grandfather just survive because he didn't
the way he did it was he didn't get off the lifeboat. He saw his wife.
So all your family were basically
No, but he had a great time. Instead of drowning or having to swim, he just didn't get off the main ship, right? He just stayed there the night.
Oh, wow.
And what he did was, it was quite cool. He'd seen everybody off, including his wife, my grandmother, right? But she drowned, right? So he'd seen them off.
Because they put the women first, I guess, on their lifeboats.
No, it wasn't like that because there was space for everybody. It wasn't like the Titanic, right? There was space for everybody, except for they weren't using all the life. But no, nobody didn't get off. They did someone. Anyway, what he did was, right?
Yeah.
He stayed on board. This is how, in a way, how cool he was. And instead of panicking, people were panicking. He saw a member of the crew upside down, tangled up in a rope that he got tangled up in, and drowning head first, right, out of panic, right. He saw all sorts of shit around him. What he did was he just sat in the bar, right, and fed himself free brandy from the bar. And sat there the night, sat it out for the night.
Waited for it all to blow over.
Yeah, he's waiting. It's Clem you're talking about. Clem, quite a character. And he just basically,
That's like Shaun of the Dead mentality.
He must be, sorry?
It's like Shaun of the Dead mentality.
Yeah, I'm not sure about
Go to the pub, wait for it all to all blow over.
Oh, yeah, I see what you mean. But it was one of them, and I was quite impressed with him actually from early on about that. I just thought that's pretty fucking cool, you know.
Do you know if any other people stayed on the ship with him?
I don't think so. I think all the rest of them.
He was I'm just not going to bother trying because I've seen.
No, he just he realised that this problem was, the issue was that the ship was exploding, right? The fire has started, to my grandfather's considerable irritants, in the women's hairdressing salon, right? It was an explosion, so there was a chance that the ship was in fact, the ship was going to sink, but it took several days and pulling it around for insurance purposes to make sure it sank, later. But he didn't know that, so that was another aspect of his cool, that he took that risk. So he's in the inferno, people are panicking, he's drinking fucking brandy. No problemo.
Come out to your green, your lovely
I know.
garden. And we've got the dogs out.
Communal garden for about 9 houses, that's all. And it's the biggest asset going, really. I mean, with the view, and it's long. It's 130 meters long, which means that you get different views. Like for example, over there, which I don't know whether you can pan onto that, but if you get beyond that bush, you'll see the river meandering along, and you've got the cottages, the hill there, and then of course you turn to here. Well, you were. You've got a really nice bit of wilderness. You've got a monkey puzzle, but you've got a lucum oak and long grass, and they keep that like that. The people who are maintaining this are really improving it. Like they're putting trees in the right places, the right trees, new trees, good trees, and it's just fantastic. I mean, look up at that monkey puzzle. We don't normally like marking Araucaria or something like that. It's just looking great today, and you can see the new bits of the whatever you call those things at the top, not leaves, coming out still, and the bark of that trunk is particularly good. So, oh, hello, I'm nearly fallen over.
He's gone from Eldon to Monty Don.
Exactly. Yeah, Monty Don goes to Eldon and then becomes Eldon again, unfortunately.
So we got up to a certain point in your childhood yesterday, Dad. So we'll carry on with the questions.
Yep.
From that point, and the first one I have is, how did losing your mother and family on the Lakonia ship shape your relationship with your sisters after the tragedy?
Yes, they had a real problem because they were 2 years older, so they were like nearly completely. The effect on them was much worse than on me, because I had the 2/3 of the year in my lovely boarding school that I was at, which was kind of like became my home, and then I only had a third of the year or quarter of the year on holiday in what became a very austere home, right, where laughter was unusual, to quote Philip Larkin, and basically they really suffered because they were adolescent. They were really messed up. One of my sisters had a child at 16 that then 4 years later died of leukemia, right? And I can remember that Christmas day, and you bet your life it wasn't the jolliest occasion. It's awful, but they, when I was very young, they used to bully me a lot because I was just older. But by the time they were adolescents, we had, it wasn't good, but there were periods where they were very friendly to me, and you know, I was sort of hanging around with their friends a bit. But overall, it was very difficult for them, and I don't think they really, I mean, they didn't really survive it, you know, in the way that I easily survived it. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. And just going back so last time you told us a little bit more immediately after you got to shore in Lakonia and were rescued. So you were 12 years old then, and it was 2 or 3 months before you became a teenager in February.
Exactly.
So do you have any memories of that just initial period when you came home, that couple of months after?
That was obviously a bit grim. So my grandfather, Clem, the great racist and fascist of his day, he was pretty good. He had to deal with the death of his mother. I can remember him coming into my bedroom once, and he never cried, right? And I can remember he cried over seeing his dead wife's clothing and having to deal with it, which is very, very powerful thing, seeing a deceased person's clothing. I mean, if you know them, if it's your wife or something. But generally speaking, he jumped back straight away into his convivial life, and drinking and playing snooker a bit, and supporting the Enfield football team. That he knew the people who ran it, and so that's about it. What were we talking about?
Yeah, no, I think that's that's good of that question for now. Let's take a little stroll down this way so you can have a seat a bit of a nicer, sunnier area.
Yeah, I'm getting a bit wobbly on my pins, but I can walk the whole length of this easily.
Yeah, well, we'll go and take a seat down there, shall we?
Yeah, no, well, you could do. Yeah, see how it goes. And hello. Walking backwards for me. This is what only royalty gets. People who have to walk backwards.
So hopefully a slightly fonder memory after Lakonia.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a bit more about the families you adopted as your own, and if and how your neighbourhood welcomed you in at that point?
Yeah, this is very part of sculpting a life, is that I became a professional cuckoo and got to learn very quickly at 12 and 13 how to identify another family and infiltrate it. And what was the question again exactly?
So just the families that you met who welcomed you in and the neighbourhoods.
Yeah, well, the key one...
Because you've told me a little bit about some of those families before.
So the very important family was this family, the Dr. Barnes family.
That's right.
And there was 5 children, 2 very beautiful blonde daughters and 3 boisterous boys, and then there was the Dr. Barnes, who was old style 1960s, affable. He'd been in the war, he treated RAF patients in the war and that kind of thing. And that generation of doctor were really charming people. He was educated. They just took me in. They really adopted me for partially, took me on trips. But I used to go over to their house and just talk to him, and his much cleverer, again, wife. And his wife was one of these very jolly women. She'd been to Oxford in the 30s or 40s, maybe, I don't know. And she just, as they did in that generation, become a housewife afterwards. And she was a brilliant woman, and she could speak German and all sorts of things. But she was just a jolly housewife. And that's what they did. They didn't resent it. They just got on with it. And it's all about getting on with stuff. And they all knew she was infinitely cleverer than they were, but particularly her husband, the doctor. He wasn't a stupid man. He was a lovely, affable, old buffer, really, and he was a very nice man, but she was not uptight about being constricted like this. She just took it on the head, as it were, and I'm sure a whole generation were like that. My favourite Penelope Fitzgerald, the author, in a way that's what they did. They were brilliant, but instead of now, if you're a brilliant woman coming out of Oxbridge with a major first class degree and all that kind of thing, you could do anything, but then you could do some jobs, but basically you're going to be a housewife. And I think that was and a mother, obviously the most honourable profession. So there's that. That's that. Yeah.
And you had an au pair as well. You were very fond of.
Well, that was in my early childhood, and she was the first love of my life, I have to say. She was a very beautiful young girl, probably she was from Norway, and she was so happy to get away from the last really starving bit of the war. And after the war, so she came to stay with us, right, in safe little Enfield Chase, and she was really on a high. She ended up in Florida, in fact, but I was the first time I was conscious of female beauty, because I just thought she was extraordinary. I mean, she looked like a cartoon, because she's so large, tall. And I was very enamoured of her. Yeah.
Right. Dad, take a seat. I'll do some panning shots of the quay and your lovely view. So I've just got a couple more questions about your childhood, but feel free to expand on anything you think I might have missed.
Yeah.
And well, this one's potentially one of the bleaker questions, but what were Christmases like in your family, and how did they change after Lakonia?
Right. Well, I'll tell you about one Christmas. So this is after my first term at university, and I came back, and I was 240 miles away, which is what I wanted. I wanted distance between me and, it's not like homesick. It's the reverse of homesickness. It's the elation of getting away from home, going to university. So I get back, right? And we have this, and it's quite a dark, big room, old Edwardian house. And there's my grandfather, my sister with a dying child, right, who was dying of leukemia. My other sister with her husband, who had a shotgun marriage because she was 16 and they got married. And my grandfather, who heartily hated the husband, right? And so it was really, really a bad Christmas day, you can imagine, right? So after the meal, I said to myself, you're all sacked. That's the end of you. That's the end of what's left of my family. And I went for a walk, just realising that I had my new friends, my new home, and that horizons were opening up for me. And I needed them like, a cyanide pill. I mean, it was just off. In fact, of course, I went back a lot, but that was when I left what was left of the family. And unfortunately, my sisters, I nearly said my daughters, my sisters, really, I mean, this child died, and obviously, it was death sentence, leukemia. And so it must, it was about 4, and it was at the Christmas table looking, it must have been dreadful. And they did not thrive. They didn't thrive. They might be thriving now, and they might not be alive now. I don't know. But, there was a split up with them because it was just too shitty, to carry on.
Well, that's you sort of answered my last question already, which what were the dynamics like in your household, living with your granddad and sisters? But and so you haven't seen your sisters, who were your closest living relatives, I guess, since probably lived their own
grandfather's funeral
life. But I guess it'd be quite interesting to reflect on your family history and the Hackney Gazette. And
sure.
All of that, because you might not have any living family, but you've got quite an interesting family that went before you as well.
It was a small family at the beginning, a small family that got decimated by the shipwreck, but they were already small. There was only 1 or 2. There was a super posh Uncle Ray and Auntie Joyce, I think, probably your name's Joyce. And they spoke in such a posh way. It was like a kind of little animal that's I can't think which. And he was one of the top people in Barclays Bank, and he spoke in a voice that was so posh you couldn't understand him. I couldn't understand. It was such a rarefied accent, and they were very interesting. And she was an announcer at the Ideal Home exhibition, that kind of thing, quite bossy, and they had 2 sons, that had real guns, right, which they claimed they had saved up for out of their pocket money, which astonished me they could accumulate such, 100 or 200 pounds to buy the bloke. Now, what we talk about, the other relations.
Yeah, your relations, your family history.
Yeah, so there's them. Saw a bit of them. Then there was Uncle Charlie, who was a tailor, I think in Savile Row, who was very interesting, who had one of those Hornby train sets that you could have out on the grass. It was fabulous, and they'd be worth a lot of money now. And I always wanted him to give me one of them. He did give me one, actually. And then, of course, what have we not covered?
You had a very good relationship with your cleaner's son.
Yes, I forgot all about that. Graham. So the cleaner for my mother, who was a very, for her age, very, very liberal, open-minded person, right? She's, she probably voted Tory, but I mean, but she had a cleaner, and the cleaner had a son called, what was his name? Graham. And basically he took me over. I was 6 and he was 12, which impressed me because, he was exactly twice my age, so I thought that's cool. And what would happen is, I would take a bus ride from my home, middle class area, Enfield Chase, a nice big, Edwardian house, to stay with him in Edmonton, and Edmonton was like really, like Coronation Street kind of place, no inside loos or anything like that. And I would stay with him and his family, so they're working class. But in the late 1950s, the working class were kind of earning as much, quite often, as a lot of these sort of faded gentility types, like my mother on a good pension and they were. So I'd be in this house, and we watch boxing, all in boxing, and they would be cooking fried food all the time, and there was a blue pall of smoke over their little front room of this, frying sausages and bacon, and I thought, aren't these working class people meant to be poorer than us? They're cooking this food. They're not poorer than us. It quite confused me because I was very class conscious. I knew exactly which part of the middle classes I was meant to belong to, that kind of thing. And he protected me, and I went out with some quite rough boys, over there. And my mother was perfectly all right about it. You just put him on a bus, tell the bus conductor where to drop me off. I went into this totally working class world, which I loved and envied because I didn't have fried food at school. And I tried to teach Graham a little bit of Latin that I'd learned, which is hilarious. He was very nice to me, and he didn't pass 11 plus, but one or two of the boys did. I noticed the big difference actually in those boys once I got into the grammar schools, and that was good. I look at you.
You can look pensively out at the window whilst you think back, or you can look at me. You can do whatever you feel comfortable.
You don't need my head in one direction.
But so I'm going to take you now back to your life at boarding school.
Right.
And it'd be good, just a general question, what was your experience like at boarding school?
Right, well I'll start with the journey there, right?
Yeah.
It's, it was 1959, which was a heat year. We'd been to Cornwall, which was the best holiday I've ever had, I think. Certainly in my childhood, best holiday, full stop. And then come back, and I'd been sent to, taken by my mother to Waterloo Station, right? And that's what you did. So you went there, and you were in your new uniform, which is kind of weird. It was short trousers with serged thick things and a little badge, and I would have looked such a prat.
What age were you when you first went?
Eight, right? And not very old for 8, and very much mummy's boy, and very much spoilt.
So why were you sent to boarding school rather than
because everybody in that place, it's quite interesting this, because all the middle class types around in that world in late 50s, 60s, they would have liked their children to go, they were frightened of ending up in the secondary modern schools, you know what they are, yeah, because they were the lowest of the low. In fact, there was good things and bad things going on in them, but basically they didn't know that their children were going to pass the 11 plus, right, which is the watershed for all children except for people who could afford to send their children to some crappy little prep school, right? So they were frightened of that, so they all sent them to these little prep schools to avoid going to a secondary modern, but that's what they're scared of. They would have loved to have gone, I think, to some of the ancient grammar schools or something, but they weren't. The kids weren't necessarily going to get in there. Meritocracy in that area. So basically, get on the train, right? My mother leaves me. I forget where the ticket is. She's actually given it. Yes, this is the colour you can imagine. There was a boy, an older boy, who was called Pond, who was sitting opposite me, right? And
Pond.
Pond. Yeah, that was his name.
Pond and Potter.
Pond. It was the day was the 24th of September, 1959. Right, obviously memorable day. So Pond said, "Where's your ticket?" And I didn't know and panicked, obviously, and I had to go.
What station was this?
Waterloo.
Waterloo, yeah.
The grandest imperial station. 31 platforms, a lot of them full of with steam trains.
Yeah.
Panting, in this. I mean, it's very, very atmospheric. And so you get on the train, and then you travel to what you think is going to be what you've read in school books, and not school books, in schools, books about schools, like Jennings and Derbyshire was my favourite at the time. And you basically thought it was all going to be hilarious and nothing but japes, right? So I had this rosy picture. I got on the train, had a very good journey. We watched cricketers coming up to bowl and all that kind of thing. That's another Larkin phrase. And the boys would look, even the disapproving Pond, me would engage in looking at the countryside from the point of view of a boy that's thinking about building a nice little thing for him, and what you would do in it, and how would you play in it, and so on. And it was Hampshire and Wiltshire and then Dorset, and before that the home counties. And it was beautiful. I mean, to see it at that time, believe you me, it's very beautiful. And basically, we went directly, in fact, we changed at Bournemouth West, doesn't exist anymore, and then we did another little journey of about an hour to the school. And you got off in the school grounds, in the middle of the school grounds, and it was evening, so it was getting dark. Walked in, and very atmospheric, right? And I wasn't yet homesick because I wasn't ready for that. And I was looking around, and the first day in the dormitory and all that kind of thing was quite convivial. Small dormitory, 5 kids. You could hear the rooks in the rook nest in the morning. And in front of you in the winter time, you would see beautiful Dorset country. First of all, you see the drive, and that was substantial, right? It's sort of a horseshoe drive with long spindly trees, and
was it called Claysmore?
Yeah, that's right.
It was in Dorset.
Yeah, but that school, the prep school, was pulled down, right? And it was a typical place. After the war, anybody who had a couple of grand on them could buy one of these houses, and that was like maybe 5-10 grand at most, right? Still a lot of money then, but it wasn't what it is now. And they could buy it and just fill it up with boys, and there's their job. They were amateurs, and they were quite often nutters, and they were eccentric.
How did it feel to be away from home at that age?
The first week I got extreme homesickness and cried nearly all the time, and I can even remember banging my head against a stone wall.
At the age of 8?
Yeah, I mean, thinking this is not right. Where's my mummy? Yeah. And where's the porridge she used to give me? Because the porridge they give here is like glue,
so you went
mixed with concrete.
Porridge to gruel.
Well, it was Dickensian. There was a huge dining room with an open fire, a big one. You could put half a tree on, right? And there was, in the mornings, you didn't have any choice about food, of course, nothing like that. And in the morning, I starved. Right. I'd drop a stone every term, and then put it on in the holidays. But anyway, the porridge, right? The porridge was a problem. So you lined up and you said big, small, or large portion. That was the option. So I said small for 5 years. I said the word small. But you still got this porridge, which was not like mummy's porridge. It was like, as I say, it was like concrete. mixed with glue. And the woman who issued it looked like a witch. She had a moustache, right? And she was a senior matron, and she was not an attractive woman. And you say small, and she'd dollop this stuff out. And the way that I tried to avoid it was to spoon it into my blazer pocket. Right? So the food was bad. Where we got up to?
Well,
the question.
I was asking you broadly about your experience then of being at boarding school. And
I'm telling you too much.
Well, I mean, that's interesting because I think the only sort of insight we got into your upbringing when we were growing up was you continually talking about the quality of the food at boarding school.
No, it actually,
and then we always mocked you for talking about that all the time.
That's so common, but the key thing is you want to talk about boarding school generally, right? I just want to make this remark. The key thing was that once I got over the extreme homesickness, right, I settled in, and what it was about those places, they were all run down country houses, right? Small estates in effect. They had, everything that a state would have. The wall, the kitchen garden, the playing fields, the terraces, and the parkland, and trees all around it, beech trees, beech wall. And the point about it was that the overwhelming effect of being sent away to those schools, which don't exist anymore, they're all poshed up or pulled down, right? They're clean. They're just well facilitated. People now have, those schools were poor, they were run by amateurs, and they weren't going to last because the Labour government that got in later was supposedly determined to get rid of them. It didn't, of course. So it was the poetry. It was the poetry and the beauty of the place that suffused me, even as a child. I loved it. It was cold and beautiful. Even the bigger rooms had a climate of their own, right? Well, then mine outside, that was like, and it was like living in the Middle Ages with characters out of Bruegel, right? That's what it looked like. Blue everywhere. Very sort of kind of cold in the winter, obviously. And the summers were magnificent. And the Meadowland has now, was it 90-something percent, 98% it's gone, right? Yeah. And there was a lot of meadowland around. So there was a lot of animation in the grounds. It was very beautiful, lots of animals. There were boys, it was countryside. I can remember a boy with a crow on his shoulder in a dormitory, right? I can remember a boy that stuck a dead mouse in somebody's slipper for a joke. It was like country shit going on. And it was very pastoral and countrified, and then Dorset, that kind of superficially looks the same, wasn't, because everybody was working on, well, a lot of people working on land outside. Smaller farms, when we had to do walks through the countryside, and that again was an education because they were small farms, mixed farms, and everything was very beautiful. I mean, it's simple as that. It was more beautiful than it can be for now. So that, like my mother's milk, coming second only to that, was the thing that has enriched my life from there on in. It was
your mother's milk.
Well, what I'm saying is
that a phrase?
The love of your mother. Yeah, it is. The love of your mother is key to you having a happy life, right? Yeah. People don't have it. Kind of, they barely make it up afterwards. And the other thing that was as important to me was the beauty of the world, of the natural world. And so those two things together made me. I was a made man by those two factors.
Well, I think that's definitely something that's been very inspirational that I've taken from you, is finding the intrigue and interest in everything around you.
That's why I said that
the natural world is all around you. So if you're interested,
it's not the countryside
by that, you don't need to travel and see everything in the world, because you've got instant interest on your doorstep.
That's such a great perception. I just realised that's the bit I hadn't perceived. The bit at the end.
How much of a genius you are.
Why I don't need. There's two reasons why you don't need to travel, right? One is books.
Yeah.
And also time travel, which is much more important to me than travelling, because I don't want to go to Dorset now. I want to go to Dorset in 1959, if you don't mind, right? Yeah. So you've got books, and you've got your memories, which are so, in my case, so dominant in my aesthetic and in my love of nature, that I don't need to go and re-see it. Anyway, it's been fucked up. Of course.
Well, yeah, I know.
I mean, I'd love to see Rome or something, but everywhere's too crowded. The places I went to were empty. You could go to the British Natural History Museum on your own. You know, now, the last time I looked at it, we were there, it was a summer, and we thought we were going to go to the in South Kent, to the Natural History Museum, and we took one look at it from a distance, and there was a queue, you know, hundreds of yards long, and it would have been full inside. How can you see? And anyway, when you get inside, it's changed. They've turned it into a meagre narrative for children, right? It's a museum for grown-up people. And now, what they used to have is loads of cabinets everywhere. You know, anyway, that's it.
Yeah, well, you've painted a really nice picture of Dorset and the surrounding parts of your school and why you're so attracted to that lifestyle in that area. But it would be interesting to get a little bit of insight as to the people you met in that period. So were there any teachers or classmates at school who had found an influence on you? Can you share any memorable stories from that time?
Right. So the teachers, we'll start with, everybody has at least one, I think, I hope, the charismatic teachers. So because they were all amateurs, right? Nobody had been, knew about teachers training or university training. They varied from very, very good to really quite bad. So the good ones, they're the bad ones. I mean, I never got sexually abused or anything like that. And I was at boarding school for 8 years. I don't think I was attractive enough, but anyway. I mean, I
can't say that.
No, I can say what I like. It's a joke, obviously, but it was a kindly school, right? Which didn't do much caning. And although it was tough, their schools were quite good. Anyway, the teachers, charismatic teachers. In the first school, in the prep school, there was a man called Mr. Glazebrook, and he was a charismatic teacher, and he was obviously something out of the war, but he was a very patrician in the nicest way kind of character, and he would tell stories about history, right? And he was entrancing, and everybody in the school, all the teachers, all the kids loved him. That's who they loved. They loved this man, Mr. Glazebrook. And then there was, and other teachers at the prep school, there were one or two good ones actually, but for brevity's sake, when I went to the senior school, there were 2 or 3. There was the history teacher, right? Miss Spinney, David Spinney, who, as I've got the book up there, who would divide his life between teaching, just in the way he wanted to teach, in this, again, run-down little school, right? And in the holidays, he would research his book, right? That he brought out, definitive account of his book, on an admiral called Admiral Rodney, and we always used to say Rodney who, kind of joke, schoolboy joke. And he was incredible. I mean, first of all, that was the ideal life for anybody, surely. I mean, they all had a bit of money, and they had nice places, but they were in school. And in the holidays, he would research this book, which was published, and it was a definitive biography of this particular admiral. And he was into naval history and obsessed with it. And so I became interested in naval history, and everybody had to anyway, because that's why he liked teaching. And for example, he was a housemaster, and when he had to cane people, right, he had a very impressive 200 strong collection of antique naval swords, right?
Swords?
Right? Swords in his study. And he would cane people with the flat of one of those swords, very gently, right? Like you were being knighted, right? So he didn't cane anybody, basically, but he was told that somebody had to be caned. So what he would do is, it was like a upside down knighting. You would have to bend it. I wasn't ever in his, I would never have been caned by him anyway.
Lucky you have avoided sexual assault and a sword.
And the sword. And how he would do it, it was, people would say, you know, this is not painful. You know, it would be like a knighting more than a pain. It would be like, you know, the Queen putting the sword on your shoulder, but it would be on your bum. So he was very cool. And the other cool one was an official, one of, you know, they were all Oxbridge, these people. You know, they taught teaching boys that weren't even going to get one O level, but they were Oxbridge, and they just, you know, had been there for 30 years, right through the war in the 30s. And so the other one, who was about 60, they were both about 50, 60, was called, his nickname was Drip, right? Which gives you an idea of what the boys thought of him. His name was Mr. Appleby, and he was, at Cambridge, he got to know E.M. Forster, the great writer.
What would drip mean? Would it be the equivalent of someone called
Weedy,
a melt nowadays?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's probably the right word, exactly. A drip is a melt, probably.
Yeah.
And so, but he was a highly educated man who took a big interest in me, and I'll tell you why, right? So, he knew E.M. Forster, right? Which is a big deal, because E.M. Forster was, you know, one of the great novelists of the first half of the century, and that's what you do for A-level. You do Passage to India, or you do Howards End, right? So, you got that. Anyway, before I went to the school, the week before I went to the new school at 13, I wanted a book, and I went into a bookshop, Pearson's, and I wanted a copy, a book by C.S. Forester, who wrote the Hornblower stories, and that was just suitable for my age, right? That's adventure stuff, history stuff for kids of that kind of age, 13, 14, 15, whatever. And adults read it as well. And so, being slightly dyslexic, I didn't pick the right book. I didn't pick a C.S. Forester book. I picked, entirely by mistake, an E.M. Forster book, right, which is adult literature, right? Room with a View, or one of those, Where Angels Fear to Tread. So I had this fucking book that I didn't want to read, but I sort of, you know, looked at it. It's a good story, this, so sorry it's taking a long time. Basically, I took this book to the school because it was a week later, and I was trying to read it and thinking, this is rubbish, you know. I mean, what's this all about? You know, it's boring, and being annoyed that I hadn't bought the right book. When you read a book in the school, you had to show the book to your housemaster, who was Mr. Appleby in my case, and he would write, if he approved of it, he would write inside in pencil, legea, which means it's a third person subjunctive of lego. It means he may read, right? It was quite a nice little thing. And I passed him the book. And he went berserk. He said, there's a boy of 13 reading E.M. Forster. You know, he must be a genius, right? I was just sitting there quietly thinking, don't think I'm going to tell him the whole story about it being C.S. Forester. You know, I'll stick with the narrative he's taken up. And I just, you know, it was just a result. So he was then kind of impressed with me. And I was good at writing essays, stories, you know, essays. So he decided, although I was completely hopeless academically, because I'd only just acquired a pair of glasses, and I couldn't even read until I got my glasses at 11. And so I was very backward anyway, at every other subject. I was in the A stream just, and they were going to chuck me out of the A stream. But he stood up for me, And I can remember once in class he said, Derrick, they always called me by my Christian name, everybody else got called by their surname.
Potter!
Yeah, there was 3 Potters in, that's why I'm in the junior school.
Right.
But I was called Derrick. And so he took an interest, and what were we talking about? What did I just get up to?
So you were just saying that the teacher was impressed that you.
Yeah. Anyway, so he was
also impressed that you were a good writer.
Yeah. So he said, and I had a very low opinion of myself. I still do, because I wasn't doing well at school. It was a crap school academically anyway. It was full of the sons of farmers and minor military people and odd bits and the occasional scholarship boy and brighter boy. So it's a nice mix in a way. I think it's now for people who aren't very, can't get into the bigger schools. Anyway, he said in the classroom, and I was failing with him, and he just suddenly said, if only you were organised. He said you could go to Cambridge, no problem. And I sort of didn't know what that meant, and I forgot about it for the next 20 years. But I just thought, this bloke rates me. And so he was very, big ego trip for me. And so there were the teachers.
That's good. And I guess if you have any memories of your classmates, because those people sort of maybe inspired you and, you looked up to, but if you formed any close friendships at that time? Yes.
Obviously, in both schools, you would know, they weren't big schools, 100 people plus, really, that's all it was. Maybe 200 in the senior school. But anyway, you knew everybody by name on that scale. So I could probably remember a lot of names. So in the first dormitory, you had 5 boys, so it was very close, right? I had very close relationships. They were my closest relationship. That's where friendship became, dominant for me, right through my life. That's the main thing, except for coming back really to family at the end, and really seeing that they're my real friends. I didn't understand when I was 13, because of the accident, how important family was. Let's just get into the friends, because I didn't have one, and everybody else did. And all through my life, I underestimated the power of blood, and that everybody else, except for me, was basically, the family was their biggest thing. So that friendship was my biggest thing. When you're 13 at a boarding school, unisex, what you get is a lot of homoerotic, close, intense friendships, right? I don't mean sexual necessarily, but they're homoerotic. They were like physical, and you were in love with them. So you had kind of crushes on children, right, at your own age, at 13, in particular at 13, right? At 14, I was looking at people that I would be thought were very beautiful, and I'd realised that hairs were beginning to grow on their legs, and I thought, this is no good for my aesthetic at all. I'll switch to females now. So I had 3 close friends, one of whose name I can't remember, but Timothy Cazzo, Michael Manson, and another boy. And what we would do is you form very culty, groups of friends, and they would count more than anything else in your life. So, for example, I never went to visit my old Latin master, who I should have mentioned, who was the most important one at my prep school. He was the one that took me on a holiday after the accident, because he heard about it in the holidays, and he took me to Butlins for a week. And again, that was a totally innocent, your Latin master, he was 50, a 12-year-old boy sharing the same bedroom, albeit in separate beds. What's that about? No, completely innocent, right? And he, again, was a very big influence on me. He came from quite a famous family, Hart Davis. And Hart Davis were big culturally. They're one of the big publishers is called Hart Davis. And he had a kind of a pencil bar moustache, and he smoked a lot and died probably of lung cancer or whatever. And he was a great person, very fierce in the classroom, would shout at people. I can remember being frightened of him from outside. But in fact, he immediately clocked what had happened to me and looked after me. So he was probably the most important.
So yeah, that's interesting. Last question I've got on your boarding school experience, and we'll break in a couple of minutes, but did your years at boarding school shape who you became as an adult, or did you have a strong personality before you went, as far as you can remember?
I think I was, before, but I was very young, so I was before 8 and before. Yeah, I did. I was the joker in the pack. I was shit at school. I could barely read until I was about 12. That was something to do with not acquiring me a pair of glasses. I did pick up on the reading once I could see, and it was all very impressionistic. That's why I was doing bad at school, partly. The influence and the effect that being at a private school has on people is total and profound. Nowadays, and even in those days, but not so much in the kind of school I went to, which is a failed school. That's why I liked it. That was the poetry of it. It was run down, failed, and failing, and it was, that had a charm and a poetry to it, right? So, but for most people who've been to a private school nowadays, of course, what it means is they make the connections they need to make in life. They hang out with their friends who go to wherever, they go into the city, or they've been to Oxbridge or whatever, and it makes them for life, because this is happening in Exeter schools we talk, that's what they do. And basically that didn't happen to me, because this was the opposite. It was like being a kind of isolated Jewish person. There was a sense of being very individual, because I didn't fit into any of these brackets. I wasn't in the elite, and I wasn't in the working class, and I wasn't in the mainstream career-orientated non-boarding school part either. So all my life I felt a loner, but in a creative way, and particularly isolated, because I couldn't even say, well, I'm Jewish, like Ivan can, say, we're Jewish, we're Jewish, but they've still got this fantastic community. So I was like Jewish without the community. I always identify with Jewish people. That's why I love.
It sounds like you're more ish than Jewish.
Yeah, exactly. I'm more isolated than even Jewish people are, right, in society. I'm like a Jewish person before they came out of the ghettos in the mid-19th century. You don't have a voice, so that's that.
I think we're getting a sense of how your personality is developing, but coming away from the point a little bit. So I'm going to move on now to when you went to university.
Oh, we're doing more. Yeah.
I've got 3 questions, and then we can wrap it up for today.
I'll try and do it.
If that's all right.
Concisely.
We've got about 20 minutes. So how did your university years differ from time at boarding school, and what did you study, and why did you choose subjects? But I'm sure you'll go on to talk about literature and the importance of that in your life.
No, I won't. I'll talk about that. I'll talk about that.
Talk about concisely why
going
you
there and
that.
The decisions I made. So basically, I left boarding school at 16, and I went to what was called a technical college, and they were very good, but they were very kind of proletarian, in the sense that there were older people there, and it was really good for me, because because they were, it's more varied, right? So I did my A-levels, and just like now in sixth form colleges, you could either thrive or fail. So if you were too sociable, you wouldn't get the A-levels, or you could do an arty and just not like it and want to go to an ordinary school, right? Which is, I wanted to go back, I was desperate. I thought I'd made a terrible mistake, basically because, I was nostalgic for my old school, and I thought I made a mistake. And it wasn't just my decision, it was because because the family wasn't as rich as they had been when my father and mother when my mother was alive. They were fine, you know, but it was my grandfather financing it all. That meant that I didn't go to posher schools. That and the fact that I probably wouldn't have got into them. And so basically I'm doing this lonely Jewish thing, which is creative, because all of these places don't fit into everybody's idea of a position in society, you know, or an elite or not an elite. They just another place called 1960s rundown, screwed up boarding schools, right? Anyway, so I did the A-levels, right? And that was very stimulating, by the way. And I didn't expect to get good grades because the teaching was great, but nobody made any comment on how you were doing. I just didn't know. And I thought I'd done all right, and I did pretty well. I got 2 out of 3 A's, and I got a county prize for my A-levels, believe it or not. I got a D in my best subject, English, kind of, you know, that's standard, you know, you get a shit mark in it. But I'd done very well. And in those days, getting an A was like a big deal, right? I mean, it was harder, less were handed out, particularly art subjects. So I suddenly thought, I'm clever, you know, and the world is my oyster, you know, like and I had applied myself to go, filled in the form, you know, they used to call it UCA form, whatever it's called now. What's it called now?
What, to apply for university?
Yeah, the UCA form was, anyway, it doesn't matter.
Sure.
You do know, but it's a different word. So I did that myself. No one gave me any help to steer me towards what I was going to do next. Nobody asked me to go to university. They didn't in those days. They just, you know, that was the end of my A-levels, and you'd go on to get a job or whatever. But so there I was, and the clever older people that I knew in my A-levels, some of them were in their 20s. So it was I was 18 by then. I was 16, and there were people about 20, 24 in there, which was a great education because they were very bright people who had worked, and they'd gone on, you know, they're grown-ups. That was superb. So I take my A-levels, and I get this good result, and then, because I hadn't filled my form in right, I put a girls' college, #1 choice, right? There were girls' colleges in those days. And believe it or not, I didn't get an offer. Right?
Well, because she could prove you were a girl.
Not just that, but I'd filled it in wrong. And anyway, you know, they weren't interested in me, right? So no offer. I thought I might go to one of the polytechnics, like a place like Plymouth would have been one of the polytechnics in those days. Good, but, you know, not uni. And then I thought, how am I going to get into a uni? And I thought, I want to be a long way away from home, please, to get away from it. And I knew somebody who was going to one of the new universities at the time, which has included Sussex and Warwick and York and Lancaster and Islington. And they were very trendy. That's where all my friends wanted to go. They didn't even think about Oxbridge. That wasn't on the menu. You had to be ushered into Oxford via people like Mr. Appleby, who would be in a posh grammar school or in a top public school, and that's how you got into Oxbridge, right? So that wasn't on the menu. I didn't even think about it. And what I did, how I got in was, because I got good A-level results, I just phoned up 3 universities. I said, right. I've got good A-levels, and can I have a place? And I got into Liverpool to study law, which would have been interesting. And I got into Lancaster, and I knew somebody going there. So that's where I went there. And so I got to Lancaster, and what was the actual question again? It was about...
Well, it was that, and why did you choose the subjects that you chose?
Right, okay. So this is another big thing for me. Big thing. Is basically, my 2 love subjects were history and literature. And my biggest love at the time was literature, because I've been taught better in literature by the technical college. And I had a great teacher for English. Can you see it? And basically, I absolutely wanted to do literature, and I didn't want the distraction of like you know before A levels that you have to do all subjects, and I was desperate to just do one subject, or at least it's complicated, but I didn't in the end. But I did a minor in history. In fact, I didn't. I went to do history, and I changed, which I shouldn't have done, because the history department in Lancaster at the time was superb. Right? It had a great man called Austin Woolridge, who was one of the professors, the head professor there. And he was a brilliant man who was interested in teaching, and who wrote the standard book after he finished teaching, not as a priority. The priority was to teach. And he ushered a lot of people that I knew into St John's College in Oxford when they did finish their first degree, because he had connections there all about 17th century and the English Civil War, and people like Christopher Hill, who was the great, he was one of the great authorities, this Austin Woolridge guy. And I should have stayed in the history department, but I went to, because the literature department was weak, with some good teachers, but I loved literature, and I basked in getting to the university. It was like bliss. It was like they paid you, right? You didn't have to pay, they paid you, which is the right way around. Because you were being paid, one, I didn't do a holiday job in the summer for 3 years. That's how well I was off, right? They gave you nearly 500 a year. I had the top figure. It was, rated according to income of your parents. But my Clem, my guardian, I discovered to my delight, wasn't liable because he wasn't my parent. And I suddenly realised a week before I went to university, they're going to give me this full grant. And it's not going to come from my grandfather, who would have done it, but I would have been beholden to him. And I had an independent income being there. And I could sit in the cafes and the eating places in the university. It was a new site, brave new world, brand new buildings, right, on a hill, right. Lancaster's huge now, but then it was only about less than 2,000, and now it's 20, 30,000, whatever. So it was still grand, and it was on a hill. It was like, the New Jerusalem for me. It was modernist. It was the modern world, right, that I was like and basically I could sit around reading the books that I loved, and that apparently was a job that paid quite well, 500 a year. That was, people were in a good business job, they might be earning £1,000 to 1,500 a year, right? And 500 a year was nearly a working class wage at the time.
So on that note, did studying and living as you did at Lancaster at university shape any other dreams or aspirations for what you wanted to do with your life?
Yeah, that came as a gloomy 14-year-old. That predates it, right? And what it was I developed an illness. It's not, well, it is a mental illness, right? And I've given it a name, right? The name for that illness is great novelitis, right? So what happens is, in those days, you're very sort of, you read a lot of literature and stuff, a lot of people, and poetry. And I decided I wanted to become a great poet and a great novelist, right? And the problem with that was that I wasn't going to become one, because most people, and particularly great novelists, which wasn't my scene, it was poetry really. I was writing reams of poetry, right? So when I got to university, I mean, this illness that I've invented, right, afflicted spotty adolescent boys of 14, gloomy and introspective, who weren't having success with girls. So my whole interest in literature was a substitute for not having girlfriends. Simple as that. It really was that. The top choice would have been, well, I mean, I wasn't aspiring to sex, because that's only people like Sean Connery and people like that, and they were already middle-aged, you watch on the screen, and they were the ones that getting the women. It wasn't 14-year-old boys.
But do you say great novelitis because you aspire to it, but you never thought it was actually...
Well, it ruins your life.
Is it similar to that
Peter
Cook quote when someone says to him, I'm writing a book, and he says, neither am I? Yeah,
that's Peter Cook. A great reply. I'm writing a book at the moment. An old friend I haven't seen for 10 years. Neither am I. Perfect reply. No, the key thing was that it ruins your life. And this is why. Because you don't rate any other career. That's why I haven't had a career. You want to be that, right? You don't want to be anything else. You don't want to even be a novelist. You want to be a great novelist, which is impossible, actually, because half a dozen people essentially are great novelists. So, one, you start writing really shit novels because you're trying to write the great novel, which is the worst kind of novel to try and write for most people. And two, you're going to fail. And three, you aren't going to do anything else that you value in life, right? You're just going to go on doing substitute stuff, like being a farmer.
Can you tell me about the friends that you made at university and any memorable experiences or adventures you had with them? I know you made some lifelong friends from there. So
that's right. So Martin was my best friend. He ended up in Sweden. He's a very good artist, actually. And so he was my best friend in the first term in the college I was in, Carmel College, it's called, pretentiously. And then his brother I met was James, right? So at the end of the first year, they invited me over to where they lived, and they lived all their lives in Cambridge. And that was a big adventure, in a way, with my friends. So I went there, having been overawed by my own experience. I absolutely loved the new university, the brave new world, the new campuses, and it was brand new, Sussex and Warwick and Lancaster and all those places. They were I just thought I'd gone to heaven, because they gave you money, It was all the other way around. Instead of you paying, you weren't there. You were a person being taught and being paid because you got into the uni, And
how did you form those friendships with Martin and James?
Well, Martin was in the same, he was living in the door next to me.
Yeah.
And he was just one of those people you thought, well, yeah, of course, that's my new friend,
And this is James, who's gone on to be a tree surgeon.
Yeah, well, James then became the person I saw much more of because Martin moved to Sweden, and so the big adventure of the end of the year was I went to Cambridge for the summer, really, to stay in their beautiful little house, right in the centre of town, really, George Street it's called. And it was fabulous. I mean, it was a bit of a shock getting to Cambridge because you suddenly saw the power and the grandeur and all that kind of thing of this place, and very, very beautiful, and the history that's missing out of the new universities, obviously. I mean, it was all opened up, so there was no cordoning off in those days. So James, who knew and Martin, they knew every street in Cambridge. They certainly knew all the colleges. They knew because they worked as post boys when they were young, and they knew every street in Cambridge. I mean, it was just it. And they lived in the most beautiful place, which I missed. They moved by then. Their mother died, and they lived in this heaven for James, which was an old farmhouse, 2 acres, beautiful old orchard on the River Cam. And that's where they were brought up in the late 40s and early 50s. I mean, it was just like heaven. And they moved this heaven to this little house, George Street. And there was me and him, and there's a bloke called Corky, who's a musician and an artist, rather. And there was a couple of other people, and we had our own private university during the summer. And James took me on a tour of all the colleges and the CAM, but you could get into them. You could walk anywhere in those days. So we saw all the lovely, exquisite insides of those colleges. And he knew them all. He accessed them all. I just had to go through them all. So that was a fantastic experience. So we had Cambridge to ourselves in that summer because you didn't have the big tourist thing anymore. You just, before that time. So it was more or less empty of students. It was ours, all the green and everything. We just, we just had it to our, it was a bit like that green out there. It's nearly that empty. So that was a fantastic experience. I can't think of this many when I was at the uni, but
so James and Martin already had big love for the countryside and nature. From when they grew up, but did they also get that buzz from Lincolnshire, from Lancaster? Sorry.
No, I mean James was in Newcastle. His brother had gone to Cambridge, I think, but Martin was at Lancaster with me,
right,
and
so
we went to the lakes.
Met James through your university. You met him?
Yeah, he just through Martin. He came over and we met at Lancaster.
And you met Chris at university?
No, I met Chris because he was in the house.
In what house?
In the George Street house.
Which was where?
Which is in Cambridge. This is a beautiful little house that summer, and so I met him, and he was at Oxford and at some grand college and doing physics. So he sort of had that cachet about him, and I didn't know him so well. I didn't get on well with Chris. We always had a very stroppy relationship, but it's fantastic. I know him now.
And you and Chris and James must be your oldest friends.
I suppose Martin first. Basically
Martin, yeah.
James. So I'm not one of these people like around here that have their best friends are their primary school. From primary school. They kind of don't. You know what I mean. There's sort of lots of locals around here. They don't do any. They just got it there, which is kind of both limiting and you're envious in a way, but it's not been like that with me. All my big relationships have been truncated and everything's been broken up and moving on. And I've got lots of close friends that were really, really close for a while and then they stopped.
Right.
And you can move on to another Bohemia, to another weird household, one household after another.
I might have a gap here, so do let me know if there's something interesting that's happened between you going to university and what the section I've got next is your life working on a farm in Wales. And my first question for that experience was what led you to work on a farm in Wales? What were your responsibilities and what was daily life like on the farm?
It was a huge financial mistake because I'd inherited this money, I had enough money to buy this small holding. It's very pretty, beautiful, a mill house and a farmhouse, on a river and going into a bigger river, and it's fucking idyllic.
In South Wales?
Yes, in the old Carmarthenshire, in what's now called David, which is silly because it includes other stuff. But very beautiful place, yeah. You had the wilderness quite nearby, and you had this sort of lush farmland there as well, so you could do dairy and sheep and anything you wanted. In that period in the 70s, it was a craze, back to the land it was called, and there were lots and lots of sort of, the kind of old rock stars used to buy farms and things, and it was a thing at the time. And also they were there to buy. They were quite cheap in Wales in particular. And what did you say? What was the question?
Well, you were answering it, which is what brought you to Wales.
What brought me to Wales was the ideal, a sort of pantheism that I've always felt about the countryside and farmhouses and living in one and the good life and all the rest of it. And obviously what happened was, one, I paid twice as much money for the bloody place, rather inevitably. So I was trapped there. I couldn't leave, right? And I was full of regret of a very intense kind, that the thought that I had in a way, it was my mid-20s, I should have been doing a career or something, but there's it was, I really, really regretted it, and really in the first months and thought, what the hell have you done? Putting yourself in this workhouse, because you had to work very hard to make a living, right? So there was no pantheism about it. It was all about fences.
And was it a working farm when you bought it? Did you have?
It was an amazing little unit, because although it was only 25 acres, the people before were real peasants. They had milked by hand every day 10 cows. They had a small dairy unit, right? And you cannot imagine, I mean, we used to milk a cow every day. It takes 20 minutes to strip a cow, of its milk. But the regret I felt, I mean, this is funny. I can remember going to a newsagent's to buy a Sunday newspaper, and this Welsh guy said, "Oh, so you've bought that little place, Abergwenllais Mill?" Yeah. He said, "Any regrets?" Any regrets? I just thought, fuck off. I mean, how dare you see through me like that? And I used to wake up every morning with a gun. My thing wanted to shoot myself. So I got over the mistake, got down to working, and the main thing was, and did become good, obviously. We knew lots of little communities dotted about and different farms, and you could go from one to the other. It was a great life in a way. I did enjoy it aesthetically very much, and being in this deep countryside, there was we had a neighbour, right? The nearest neighbour was in Abergwenllais Farm, and there was no shit around it. It was just one nice building off, and then another a long way away, called, it was this couple, right? And they were off their fucking heads, right? And they were living, this is how people lived. They had a really good big farm. We only had a small home. They had a proper dairy farm run superbly by a woman called Mrs. Mack, right? And she was a sort of posh old thing that was 65 and wore a bobble hat. And she had married a German prisoner of war, who was called Mr. Mack, because that's how important he was just Mr. Mack. And they were this old couple living near us, and they were amazing. I mean, this woman, right? This is how wild it was. One of the people I went with was Miranda, my old girlfriend, who was completely off her head herself. She was bipolar, very charming. And she could ride horses, and Miss Mack lent her horse, right? And her horse was fat and out of exercise, for a reason I say. And she said to Miranda, fair play to you, that horse didn't throw you off, I take my hat off to you, And what had happened was this is how mad this family was. One, they had 30 cats, right? Two, they lived in a superb place that was fucked up. Anyway, she had got caught drunk driving, right? So that's death to a farmer. You're losing your car, right? She's 65, right? And she's posh, right? But she looks like an old cheroot or something. She's just like a bit of twist, a bit of twisted licorice with a bobble hat on the top. And this is what happens. I swear to you, this is what you could find out there. You could find crazy, interesting people living these private lives. So she gets arrested, right, and taken to the police station to be checked for her alcohol content. She's 65. And what she does is, she's left in a cell, she's going to lose her license for 3 years. She's got to do something about it. She climbs out the window and tries to do a runner. The police catch her immediately, pull her, take her back, and she loses her license for 3 years. What does she do? she takes to her horse that hasn't been ridden, right, for years and is very wild. And people are laughing at her about using this horse as a means of transport, her only means of transport. So what she does is she takes the whole of it, into the front bar of the local pub. That takes a horse in, right? It's most of the horse, it just fits in. And she lies underneath it to prove to the locals how tame it is. That's how crazy they were. And they were our neighbours, and so it was...
So a horse walks up to a bar.
Exactly, why the long face? Well, she lost her licence for 3 years. That's why the long face. We went over to their farmhouse, which was a beautiful building. I mean, but it was fucked because of these. I think it was 24 cats. Let's not exaggerate. All over the place, shit everywhere. And she said, you want some eggs and bacon?" And we said yes, hungry. And she said, "Well, I'll just fry you up." And she got this frying pan up off the floor, and this Mike said, "Is that the one that the cats seem to be using to pee in?" She said, No, that's this is a cast iron one. That's the one for the cats. Reassuring.
So you managed to build up a bit of a social life, even though it wasn't in its existence. So I imagine the remoteness of that place didn't really suit you too well, but you managed to make friends next door and the people in the local pub.
I like the remoteness.
How was your social life there? And did you like the remoteness?
Yeah, and I like the social life. Fires, open fires, music, lots of hippies, lots of eccentrics knocking about in the area, all in this wonderful pantheon. I mean, it's just like the countryside. Being inside it. And then we did little trips. We used to go to Bristol very occasionally, which was like going to a magic castle, really. Welsh towns are shit. They're all built in the late 19th, most of them in the late 19th century for the poor, and they're crap. So the local one was called Llandovery, and that was fine. But when you get to Bristol, you think, this is where I really want to end up, Bristol or London or something magnificent like this. I want to get back inside the whale, as Georgia Walker, inside the beast of the city. I want to be in that. That's my true pantheon, my true place I want to be. I want to be back there. I was really missing it culturally anyway. I mean, no eating places, very little cinema. Some cultured people, but did a lot of reading,
So that experience influenced your views on life and work, and how so? And I guess there was probably quite a particular moment on that farm that you sort of realised it was a bit of a waste of time involving turnips.
Yes, that's right. That was my moment of the moment of enlightenment. So it's a bit like Hamlet, but instead of a skull and talking about the skull, alas poor Yorick, I had this fucking great big swede in my hand.
It's a eureka moment.
And it was a eureka moment, and I realised that I was in the wrong business. In fact, I realised I ought to be in a business, right, that didn't involve lifting up live animals and back-breaking shit. And anyway, didn't pay. So I was in a field of swedes that we'd grown to try and sell, right, normally from just a sheep. And they were selling a bit, but only a few bags at a time. And I was thinking what a shit product it was. I mean, it had everything wrong with it. It was big, heavy, was worth virtually nothing, and rotted. So you had to sell it quickly. So what's the opposite of a swede? I thought a diamond dealing, right? And I didn't do diamond dealing, but that's neither here nor there. My friend Ivan was a diamond dealer in that, in London, and basically I thought, I've got to get out of this. I need a sedentary occupation, and I was interested and knew quite a lot about books. I knew this guy, right, that turned out to be a criminal, but I nevertheless went to business with him because he knew about books, Willie Moulton.
Right, so yeah, I mean...
You should know about the trial, that's the funniest thing.
This leads me on quite well.
So can I just say, so that's the transition, and then I sold the farm, bought the shop in London, moved to London, and, started a business that was feasible, that was easy to do.
And the business you started, which is now a jewellery shop, where you might have some diamonds there, but
exactly.
It started off for you as a second-hand bookshop. So you
second-hand, but antiquarian collectible, so that we were dealing with everything. That's not that common. I mean, there were places like that, but it was a great shop because I just dealt in everything, and I went to all the auction houses, and it was to do with knowledge of collectible books, and being
so
able
you
to
had
make
some
money out of it.
knowledge through your university years, and also this guy that you knew.
Yeah.
So do you want to just tell us a little bit more about what inspired you to start a second-hand bookshop and how you sort of got into trading?
Because I knew him, and he had the knowledge that I needed, that I didn't have, the bit that I didn't have, which is book dealing and what books were worth and blah, blah, blah. And so he was broke. He wanted me to, look for him for a lease on a shop. So we would do it jointly I would be in the farm, but we'd be making money dealing in books as well. But I rapidly realised that I just wanted to go to London anyway. And also, I bought the shop, which he knew the bloke would sell it, and he did us, the family, a huge favour. He said, look, this shop, you can buy it. I bought it off, so the lease I bought off a load of anarchists, and it was, the bookshop was called Rising Free, right? And they moved to Mare Street, obviously their ideal. I gave them £2,700, I'd never seen such money. And simultaneously, I was buying the freehold of this Indian guy who only wanted 25 grand because he hadn't got vacant possession and he was going back to India. And so I got this result. I bought the house and the shop at the same moment, the same day, precisely at the same moment, because I had to buy the lease and the freehold without the two parties talking to each other, right? So Willie Moulton put me through to this, right? But the snag was, Willie Moulton turned out to be a major criminal. So basically I was going into partnership business with a criminal, really. He was very refined posh accent, but he'd actually...
Was he the guy working in the shop with you?
Yeah, he was the one with the knowledge and I was the one with the money, and then I wanted to take the knowledge of him and then so
he went on to die by AIDS in the event.
Yeah, in 92 he died of AIDS. But this is the funny thing, the trial, right? If you know the trial, you know this one is good anecdote coming up. Best anecdote ever, right?
Yeah.
This will set me alight. I'm back to my perky self. I've been caffeinated, wined and dined.
Well, not dined yet.
Not dined, wined and watered.
Yeah.
Now, this is actually genuinely funny. So basically, I'm going into business with him, right? And I'm going to London every now and then from the farm and looking at premises, right? So it's all set to go into business. But he then says, I've got a bit of a problem. I'm being accused of fencing. You know what fencing means? It means that you sell on something that somebody you know has stolen.
Right.
So
not fighting with swords.
Fencing is the same as stealing in the law, so you get an equal penalty. Quite right. So he just downplayed it and said, we've passed on a few books that didn't belong to us, and got to go to court. He didn't want to let me know how serious it was, because he wanted my money to start the shop up, and he wanted, he needed it. So what happened was, I go, this is just ridiculous. He says, right, could you be my actors, speak on my behalf? Because they're going to plead guilty. When you plead guilty, you have somebody that will speak on your behalf to say nice things about you in mitigating the crime, right? And then you get what I thought was just going to be a fine, because I didn't know that it wasn't books, right? It wasn't books. What they'd done was, he got a partner in crime, the one who'd done the stealing. And this man was an extremely charming man. I knew him as well. I knew him through him. And he was the most evil person you can imagine. And he was an undergraduate at Cambridge. And he was a heroin addict and a paedophile. And that was his main hobbies in life. Right? But anyway, in order to finance his hobbies, he had stolen out of a Cambridge college, right, documents, not books, that he thought weren't, listed in the, that they weren't, there wasn't record of it, bollocks, they were all there. And what it was what he'd stolen, not a few books, it was documents about the voyage of Captain Cook to Australia, right? Really important documents worth tens of thousands even then, right? And he's stolen these, given them to fence to Willie. Willie had taken them into a pucker antiquarian bookshop. They'd recognised, they checked out the provenance, realised they were stolen. The two of them got nicked, right? And that's what it was about. It wasn't about because they were trying to. So I innocently I travel. It's lambing time, and I'm fucked. I've got sheep shit all over me, and I've got a leather jacket on, and I'm trying to be respectable, and I've got dreadful shoes on, and I go to the court. The barrister, who's the defending barrister for Willie, takes one look at me and says, "No, he's no use. No use to you. You can't use him. The judge won't like him." So that was 200-mile journey wasted. So I was just in the audience and watching this fucking trial, right? And the judge, right, presiding, it was a Crown Court. You see, it wasn't a minor thing at Cambridge. His name was Judge Wilde, right? And he'd had more appeals than one against him than any other judge in the country. And he was a very angry man. Right? He'd sent 2 people to prison for 2.5 years for being in possession of 1/4 ounce of dope, of smoke, right? They won their appeal. He had more appeals won against him. That's who they came up against, right? So they plead guilty, right? Yes, we've done it. We've got nicked. And then the mitigation starts. So they don't use me, right? Because the barrister, can't use him. Really. I mean, where's he come from? He smells, But they do use this bloke from Cambridge, right? The evil man. He's got 2 academics from Cambridge to talk on his behalf. I have never seen such stupid people, right? Because they didn't get the idea. They didn't realise who they were dealing with. Judge Wilde, right, who was, by the by, I had a staring match with him. He just started looking at me and boring holes through my eyeballs and looking at my sheet besmeared costume with some lack of respect, shall we say. And it's like, and at least 2 fucking academics, quite the most stupid people I've ever seen, they start going on about what genius this bloke is and how clever he is. And they're saying he's one of the cleverest students in Cambridge. He's a brilliant man. Mitigating? Hardly. I know what the judge is going to say, and he says it. He said, well, this just makes it worse. 2.5 years. First offence, fuck off. That's the end of the thing. They go down to the cell. I go out into the sunlight. So it's a summer. It's spring. I'm free. And they've gone. And I still went, they did 9 months in prison. They hard as nails, these two, you know. I mean, they just, you know. But I did go into, but then he came out. Then I bought the place. Then I moved to London, all in 1981, beginning of. And it served me quite well, although he wasn't the book dealer he thought he was. He was too cautious. He was doing the buys at auction. I was sitting in the shop most of the time, but I was absorbing it. And so that when he died of AIDS, and I'd left for a while because I couldn't bear hanging out with him because we weren't friends. He was quite unfriendly, really, Willie. He was an interesting man, but it was very hard. And he was had his little sort of gay coterie of people that he was into, quite snobbish. He had this rarefied accent that he'd actually acquired at an orphanage boarding school, right? He was, you know, really hard. I mean, like, he once got caught cottaging, right? He was meant to be at an auction. I was sitting in the shop and I got a phone call saying, oh, Derrick, I'm a spot of bother. Police are just accusing me of cottaging, you know, going in and consorting in a loo. And I said, you're meant to be in fucking Christie's. He said, well, you know, I got, you know, they're accusing me of this thing. You know, you obviously got for somebody in this public loo, which funnily enough was Joe Orton's cottaging area. If you know Joe Orton, they want a blue plaque on it. Joe Orton's a famous gay writer. And anyway, so he's in, this is how hard he is. He is taken into what they did in those days to punish gay people. They wouldn't charge them. They caught them in a loo having sex, right? And they would take them into the court. They would keep them in for the night, right, as punishment. And then in the morning, they weren't charged. The process was you went to the magistrate and you were bound over to keep the peace, right? And what that means is you're let off, you've not got records, you've just got to bow your head, do this thing. And they say, will you be bound over to keep the peace? And everybody says yes, right? Obviously, and then they can go back into the sunlight. No. He says no. No one's ever said no, ever, in legal history before. No, I won't. It's outrageous. He definitely, you know, he would have been caught. He wasn't falsely accused, but he was quite rightly just, I'm not having any of this shit, you know, and that fused the whole system. And the judge actually started telling the police off and saying, I agree with this. What the hell are you doing? And of course, that was how hard he was. Somebody poured a whole can of petrol over him because he had a gay lib badge on at bonfire night. Can you imagine the danger of that and the fear? He just went to the police, who he hated, without even changing his clothes, said, these people have poured petrol over me and we'll come on, let's nick them. And they went back and nicked the people. That's how hard he was.
Well, that's a pretty mental story. But you did get into going down to the auction houses, eventually down towards Angel to Camden Passage.
Oh, lovely, yeah.
So yeah, do you have any memories of going to the auction houses, of books? Where else did you go? Were you able to find rare and valuable items?
Yeah.
What were the other book dealers like?
What was that?
Other people who were there, the other book dealers like?
Well, my best friend in the book trade had a very famous, even poem by Betjeman mentions it, in Farringdon Road, right? And that was a big centre for a certain important part of the book trade, which was these two Barrow, it was a family, they're all called George Jeffrey, four generations, very working class, but very knowledgeable about the price of books. Like, you know, didn't open one. And they got all their supplies from Christie's and Bonhams and Sotheby's, because they were, just gave them all the bulk. And they put it out, and they had and the dealers would come and behave like pigs, and they'd make an absolute fortune out of this. Very, very wealthy people. So that's one thing, the old book stall thing. These people, after they'd made their money on a Saturday from the dealers, from the money, from the books, the collectible books that they actually paid money for, they would then, they all behaved like pigs. It was like pigs in a trough, kind of thing, for a half an hour. Then they'd go away. The general public would then, just by reading copies of things the rest of the day, they paid no money for. They took in the 70s £1,000 in pound coins out of their bunts, out of what was left over, out of what they hadn't paid for. They were so rich, these people, that his father was sued for £25,000 from the Inland Revenue in 1959, and he just paid it. Just, I've got it somewhere. Cash everywhere. That's how rich they were. Then there was the institutions of the great auction houses, Christie's in South Ken, and Phillips and Sotheby's in Bond Street. So you go to them, you would view the sale, then the following day you would hopefully steal from the rich things that they'd missed, in effect. Big ego trip. If you can make money out of your knowledge, simply there were rich people around you, they missed it, they hadn't seen it, they would come to you afterwards and say, oh, I got here too late, and you bought that book. And I said, yeah, I haven't I? Yeah, would you sell it to me? Yes, I will. Would you sell it to me anywhere near the money? No, I will not. I want a big profit. Big ego trip, that one. Then you would go through all these huge quantities they used to have, and you would find something. We found a book they never have the big lots anymore. They lot them up, and they don't have much stuff anymore to sell. And we found, for example, a book that's probably worth about £200, which was the memoir of some German general in the Wehrmacht after the war, and he limited edition 50 copies of his memoir. But he sent a copy to Churchill because he'd known Churchill before the war, and he wanted Churchill to back him up so that he wasn't going to be tried at Nuremberg, right? He was just a member of the Wehrmacht, and Churchill was fine about that. They had a correspondence stuffed into this book. There was 5 letters from Churchill to this man. They're worth a fortune even then. And so you would find things that had things in them, like a letter, and you'd see dealers shaking things to see if a letter from a Keats letter mysteriously appeared or something like that. And then so it was that. And then the third angle of it was getting into posh people's, academic posh people's houses when they'd either died or they're old and they were moving. And so
just
in Barnes,
there for
good stories, eh?
Very good stories. So we're picking it up now, Dad. If
Yeah.
you want to carry on, anecdote.
The anecdote commences.
So the sort of stuff you sort of found in books, and then I guess
But the other element, the most profitable, was getting a call to go to somebody's house. You knew that that's where you're going to make the big margins, because they will have Barnsley, Canterbury, Hampstead, Highgate. They didn't have flats. They had whole buildings in those days. They might be 4 stories high, and they would be full of books from top to bottom. I mean, I got in one old academic's house. I told you about I won't tell you about that. Let me have a think. I mean, it was a gold mine, because you knew that they were cultured people, they were writers and everything, and so their books would be full of artworks and letters. And
what's the most you ever sold a book in your shop for then?
I think it was that Churchill thing, and it was a few, I can't remember now. It would now be worth those letters would be, they'd be where that'd be. Yeah, there were one or two other things. They were mainly on the level in those days. A lot of money then for a book of hundreds and maybe £1,000 or £2,000 for the top end stuff. But that was a lot of money then. If it was an artwork, it would be 50,000 equivalent quality.
Well, because people had an understanding, because you got these collectibles and these very interesting and antique books. You had certain regular customers who came in. Yeah. So did you have any customers, colleagues, fellow book dealers who became part of your social circle? What were they like? What were the sort of people who came to the shop on a regular basis?
Well, the people were absolutely, because of where it was in exactly the right place at the right time. In Islington.
181 Upper Street.
181
Upper Street.
Yeah.
North London.
M1
1RQ.
1RQ. And you lived there, I've lived there, and it was like the greatest bit of luck. You're in the right place at the right time. There are all these cultural people living around there. They would never pass a shop like mine, whether they were politicians or they were academics or they were artists or they were fashion people or whatever they were. If they were, and just anybody, they were interesting people that I would really want to meet. And my role, my talent, my only real talent was that I'm a bit flickery-eyed. I don't stick to one subject. I'm a, what's the word for it?
A flâneur?
Well, I'm certainly a flâneur. At least, I am. That's what I want. That's everybody's ideal, really, in life, I would have thought. But these people come in, and because they were achievers, and they have the, discipline to focus themselves and write books, and quite a lot of some very substantial books, right? And make films. And I met them all. I mean, I could name drop until I dropped over all this.
But Boris Johnson one that often used to
he wasn't friendly, but he wasn't obviously he's not one of the interesting ones.
No.
But I did manage to sell him a set of Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, which he wanted for his son, who was 4 at the time. It was over 40 years ago. I actually ripped him off. It wasn't a very good set, an 19th century set, but anyway.
But one of your tactics to sell were just to talk to the customers until they bought something, wasn't it?
Well, no, I'll tell you first of all about what you were asking about, which was the kind of customers, because that's key.
Yeah.
The thing I realised was I'd hit the right profession finally, or the only profession for me, which is that I can't remember the bloody word for it now, but when they're a bit of everything and they're not really, a scholar, they're just, what's the word? Anyway, I was one of these people with a very broad, my role was to know everything, just nearly literally, right? The people who were coming in were really high quality, much brighter than me, focused people who'd written great, who'd
Can't
achieved.
think of the words, you probably say the phrases, jack of all trades, master
Yeah,
of none.
exactly. I was that. And basically, I discovered that they needed somebody like me because you've got to be a bit blinkered when you're going to be an achiever and focus on something. They needed an old darling like me to point out what was on either side of that blinker. That's for the best thing I did in that shop was to make connections, telling connections for these brilliant people. And I would say to a banker, or to an artist or whatever, something about another subject which was pertinent to them, but they were too focused to have seen. And I would do that. And so that was my role, and particularly buying something. What I would do is I'd be in an auction house and I'd see a book worth a lot of money, and I would think, I'm going to sell that, and I know who's going to buy it. They don't even know yet that they want it. But I know that they're going to want it and they're going to cough up because I can see the connection there and so on. So that was what I did supremely well in my life. That was the one thing I did really well. And it would involve, it could be anybody. It could be that, what's that famous fashion guy who killed himself at the end, you know, the Cockney bloke anyway, him, you know, he used to come in.
I don't know off the top of my head.
Anyway, there was millions of these kind of people. There was a lot of great musicians came in. I mean, like top famous ones. And
so your business was in the 80s and the early 90s before the introduction of the internet, which was also key.
No, you got it slightly wrong. I left because by the turn of the century, it became like that. So the process was this: until you were there, everybody, if you had a hobby and you knew a great deal about it, right, like books or vinyl or anything, you could. And you were an oddball, and you didn't want to. You weren't up for being in the corporate world or anything. You could make a living out of your knowledge, right? That was the kick. You could just go into Sotheby's and make some money because you knew something in the privacy of your mind that other people didn't know around you. You could trade. You could go in and buy things cheaply off people because you knew, and they didn't know. And that's how you made money. It was a big ego trip, and it was practical. You could make a living out of it. After 2000, in particular after millennium, the internet got such that it had taken your private knowledge out of your head and stuck it on public view. How can you make any money like that? Because you make money because you know something somebody else doesn't know in front of you. You say, oh, yeah, that's quite a nice book. I'll give you a tenner for that. And you think, just wait and think, they don't know. They don't know. I've made it. I've and so on. And that was it. That's how it stopped for everybody. That whole world collapsed at that point.
Yeah, I mean, it still impresses me now how you have got a good memory even for new things, but you remember a lot of poetry, a lot of literature, a lot of history, and you can recite that. I wish it must have been it's strange even in my lifetime that the internet has changed the way you consume knowledge and the way you interact with the world.
I mean, you do it supremely.
That way it must have changed for you in your,
for me,
your
obviously,
40s or even 50s.
50.
Yeah.
I was 15 in 2001.
Yeah. Yeah. So, is Black Books based on the Upper Street Bookshop?
Well,
key question.
Right, okay, of course it is. And I'd like to think so because somebody came into my shop and some of those comedians and the writers and things live nearby there, and they said that. But it's not true, I'm sure, because it was so much written for those three great comic actors. But the shop looked a bit like mine, but Mr. Black, what's his name, the actor, magnificently had no interest in selling or reading. Oh, he was a reader, but no interest in books selling at all. So the comedy of Black Books is, it's nothing to do with the books. It's just the place and the mad people. So I had the mad people, I had that one, I had the sidekicks, right? And I had the social life like that. But unfortunately, it probably wasn't based on me, although of course it would be a glorious thing to think it was. But I mean, I'm a different kind of character to him, that's all. I'm a character, they're characters, but he's that kind of, black, and the whole thing about being rude to customers and stuff. And that wasn't my scene. I wasn't smarmy with them, but I knew how to handle them.
But I think Black Book's probably based on a lot of those kind of books
exactly
in the area at the time.
Yeah. And they made, all those writers were the kind of people living around in Upper Street in Islington at the time.
So what were the other shops on the street like? Describe the community and anyone on the street you met along the way.
So it's about a mile long, isn't it, Upper Street, and it's a magnificent, particularly at the other end, Georgian street. you know, leading into the hum of the city. I mean, you know, fabulous. Better than Camden. Certainly it's in that period, in the 1890s. And that's
1890s.
No, well, I tried to live in the 1890s. That's where I put myself psychologically. You know, I'm there with you know, with Beardsley and Wilde, and you know, we talk at great length. You know, and
but you got a great poster of all the shops that were on that street.
Yeah, it's over there. You can.
There were some interesting ones.
Well, it was. That's a photo shoot of about '95, I think. And so the beauty of it is that there was the money there to have specialist shops. So, you know, they're the interesting ones. Upholstery shop, a bespoke tailor's shop, Charlie's shop, but particularly very, very specific. It's like buying a book. You want it as specific as possible to be less general the better. And the obvious example of that is the button shop. The shop that sell nothing but antique buttons. I mean, what a great shop. And you think, I mean, you know, think of the people that have used that. They would have been in the film industry, in the fashion industry, and they would have been people who can make their own clothes. And you would go through the stuff and think, this will suit this period drama that I'm you know, doing the clothes for, because that is just the kind of button somebody would be wearing in 1919 in January or something like that. And I was selling the book details for those kind of people. I was selling old store catalogues, old Gamages and Selfridge's catalogues from a particular year, like 1910. And someone would come in and say, I'm making a film, you know, set in 1910, and I need to know prices, I need to know everything that was going on at that point, right? And I say, here you are, mate, that's the man for you. A catalogue from Gamage's 1910. You can go away to your heart's content and look at exactly how much a pair of rubber boots cost, or a pram, or an article of clothing. You know, perfect.
Sorry. So beyond a bookshop, what was your life like living in London? Describe the crowds you hung out with and any particularly memorable experiences or friendships from that time.
I think I'll have to truncate this because I met a lot of people.
Yeah.
And I'm just thinking of, you know, time and everything. I mean, one thing that I've done all my life is being single most of my life, especially when I was married. We're not now, happily, you know, but not being on my own, the cuckoo. So you're going through different bohemias, like there's families that I nicked, like the early ones, like the Barneses that were my real home, was that Barnes family, the old doctor.
So what was that the most exciting time to live in London for you?
Well, I think that it changes every decade or so, doesn't it? I've seen 8 decades of it, actually. I've seen it, you know, but you mean when I was working the bookshop, or any time? Working in the 80s and 90s.
In the 80s,
in that
period before we moved to Exeter in 97.
Well, right. But first of all, it's after that as well, because it's fantastic in the millennium, because it suddenly goes all massively rich and glossy, and you know, that's exciting as well. But I like the kind of loose, quieter, but still incredibly busy 80s and 90s, and all those sort of people, characters and friends. Did I have any? Yeah, I had a lot, and they were people that I would just, for example, halfway through my time in the bookshop, I just got fed up with William Moulton, and I just walked out of the shop and said, I'm not working here for a while.
So obviously you had the shop in Upper Street.
Yeah.
You had the house and what went to be our family home from.
Yeah, well, let me tell you this one.
Park. So I just want to get a sense of how you lived your life. Your
well, this is
life
an example, and then I'll go up the road, as it were, to the other end of it where I was living, Blythe Road. But there, for example, perfect example of the way that I make progress through life with relationships is I break into somebody else's scene. So on this day, right, it was 1985, June, I decided I couldn't work with Willie Moulton anymore. I wanted a break. I said, look, I'm leaving for a while, several years it turned out. But anyway, I was leaving. I'm going now. And he said, fine. And I said, you run the shop. I'll take some money out of it. See ya, right? I walk out. That's a privilege I had. I could do such a thing. I walk out. I've got a book because a girl has come into the shop that I fancied that was asking for a particular book. And she's given me her address, right? Round the corner in Westbourne Park Road, number 5. 5 minutes walk from the shop. I think I'll go and take this book over, because I might get offered or something. And I walked down there and I knocked on the door of this nice beaten up old big house, and somebody came down, another woman in a sort of silk dressing gown. It was middle of the day, they were just getting up. I walked through that door and I don't think I left the premises for 2 years. I did, I went backwards and forwards to Blythe. So I walked into a scene and thought, this is it. This is my new Bohemia. All I have to do is to talk and lounge about, and people will wake you. You'll be woken up in the morning by somebody talking to you and trying to, talk to you about some fucking subject. And there were 3 girls there in sort of kimonos kind of thing. It was all beaten up, and there was this bloke who became my best friend for a while. What's his name? Stig, right? Stig, the original Stig, from Sweden, who I talked to recently actually. He's had cancer as well. He lives in Sweden now. And I just thought, this is my new home. This is how it works. I go from house to house like this. That was just like Ivan's houses. A mega, different kind of Bohemia. And all these places and all these relationships have a beginning, middle and end, right? So you go in, the trick is to go in at the end of the beginning, right? Knock on the door. It's just taking off, it's just people there. You become their best friends. You just keep in the same room. You eat, you go to Clapham and have parties with the posh boys down there and come back and slob about in Islington. And there's a woman that the one that I took the book, I was convinced I was in love with her, which fortunately the delusion didn't work for either of us, so that was fine. But it was friendships all the time. It's about friendships. It is here now. It's about there's family, and almost as important are all these friends that I've imported. I mean, last night I had these young girls here because we're mates and we're just hanging out, just in the same sort of way. Because I'm very old, I'm not, there's no creepy shit about, and just hanging out with them. And I'm still doing it to this day. I started at 12 and I did it last night.
So
every time.
And from your London days, so were there any friends that you wish you were still in contact with now?
Yes, particularly because what happened when I left from Wales and moved to London, I wanted to discover the countryside that wasn't Wales, the West Country at the weekends, right? And I met through James in Highgate in a lovely house, a guy, Paul Mouse, and he is still alive, fortunately, he's older than me. White hair and very bent now. He was a strong man in those days, and he sort of come visit us in Norfolk.
He's carpenter in Norfolk, isn't he?
Yeah, he was a cabinet maker. I mean, he was highly skilled, but he never made any money, But I mean, as you do. But they lived in this my ideal country world, which was in Norfolk, which is quite utterly different to Wales, the opposite. Big skyscapes, very dreamy, lovely farmhouses, many, many more beautiful buildings everywhere, because it'd been rich since the Middle Ages. Wool trade, no wolves in England. You can have sheep, you can sell the wool to Europe. That East Anglia became the richest place in Europe, virtually, there. So they build these fabulous churches everywhere. And the sky, you see much more of. And he had a fabulous, cold farmhouse, Cold Comfort Farm, if you know the book, Stella Gibbon. And it was very beautiful, and he was my mentor for about 10 years. I used to go there every weekend and stay there. I used to bicycle to Liverpool Street Station, wherever it was, put the bike straight on to the train, go to Norfolk, and then cycle or take another train about 14 miles to Reading, where he lived. And it was a very beautiful place. They bought their house without looking inside it. They bought it in an auction, and they thought, well, this will do. Beautiful place. And he was a very close friend.
Yeah, well, I have really nice memories of travelling to Norfolk to see their place.
Yeah, of course.
So that's someone you'd still like to be in contact with now.
Yeah, but I haven't seen them. There's so many of them.
On the flip
close
side,
friends.
Are there any people you wish you hadn't met or given time to?
Which I hadn't met.
Or given time to in London or otherwise?
Well, regrets on that front would be about relationships, because of the time that they take to run their sorry course when they made a bad decision. It can take you, it's the biggest time waster for anybody. That's why I talk to people and say, just get out of it. And people say, I will, but it takes them 5 years to get out of something. I've done that with Joe, for example, who I live with, and with other people in my relationship life. Really wasted acres of my youth on the wrong people. But I can't think of friendships like that I regret. There's one or two people that let me down, like Graham, who's I did have a good time with, but he's a bit of an evil motherfucker, and so there's no point in going back there. And anyway, he hasn't talked to me for a long time.
So moving on, I guess. So we moved to Exeter, as I remember it, on August 27th, 1997. And from that period for a number of years, you spent your time half between London and half between Exeter, where we were a young family growing up. So how did you balance your time between London and Exeter in that period?
Well, balance is the thing that was missing, because, in my 40s, so I was still in my 40s then, right? And it was Tony Blair had just got in, and Princess Di died, and blah, blah, blah. And there we were in a brave new world, which in a way it was. The Blair period was a great period. Great for the NHS. They all thrived. People like Tess and Crispin, they went off on a rocket. And so I was going backwards and forwards, not for any good reason, really. And then, of course, Mum very much decided she did not want to live in the same house as me, which took a long time for me to kind of, digest. And anyway, it was okay. And there were good times and great family times there. And then I was having an increasingly bonkers time in London. And then in my 50s, I did go into something that it was middle-age crisis plus an insane amount of drugs, basically. And so that was all chaos, right? Which led to lots of lurid stories that I could tell you about, but probably not. But basically, I came back to my senses unconsciously. I'm really skipping it because it needs skipping in a way. It's not, we can go on forever about all of this, but basically, being split between two houses is not good for anybody, I don't think. You don't get, You don't. I mean, here you just sit here, and the life comes to you. That's what's happened to me. So at the end of, I mean, you can ask me whatever you like about that period, but I mean, I'm not going to say anything more about it. It's a big stretch.
I think there's got lots of.
It was a great time for
funny
you.
Anecdotes, but
I mean, it was Hey Little Hen. When
Yeah.
you lay me an egg for your tea.
No, I
we
mean-
sang it. No, that was a key thing. It was family life, nevertheless, was fantastic. Snatches.
And well, let's talk about that. How was your experience having a family home outside of London and your memories of us all growing up in Devon?
It was ultimately a waste of time, but it was very stimulating. And I did, Janet, I share this with Janet. We both like our own space, actually, if you don't mind, and we've got the money to do it. So we don't have that economic cramp that people have to live by, which they have to live together in the same house all the time, whether they want to or not. And we had the privilege of not having, both of us had the privilege of being able to live in our own. I was very hurt by having to leave Polslow Road in particular, which I loved it. I found it, and I thought that was a perfect family home, and I did love that house. And it wasn't like banishment from, from Eden, because it wasn't that sudden. It wasn't just get off the premises. It was over 10 years, that gradual thing. And then I lived in London for 1 or 2 years entirely on my own at the end, when you were already long past uni and all the rest of it. Then I came back in 2013, end of it. And I didn't know what I was doing. My subconscious told me to sell the place to save my life, because I was behaving irresponsibly, to put it in its mildest form, with my body and my mind. And so I had to get back to reality and go back here, and then
shoot you in front of your flat at 8A. So it's getting a little bit dark now, but this is Colleton Crescent. We've been out on the green already. We're going to go and have a little drink, little sundowner in the Hourglass. But yeah, I was just wondering, so in Exeter, tell me about the place that you currently live and the crazy Crescenters, as you'd fondly call them. How did that community come about?
Well, it's a WhatsApp thing. It's called Crazy Crescentness, so it's more of a concept than that. So this is perfect for anybody in the town. Look at it. You can see how lovely it is. And then instead of being houses on the other side, there's this private green. And since I'm ill, that's out for me over there. And Will can tell you how glorious that is. And it's like parts of London, it's like Bristol, parts of Bristol. You've got the provincial grandeur of this crescent, unlike Bath or anywhere, it's only 9 houses, but it's kind of our idea of grandeur around here. And you've got Brigitta's lovely house at the end with a fantastic garden, that's, and then you've got a nice Georgian mansion beyond. And these people are beautifully wealthy, and they've got a row of Aston Martins. They've got a 60s Aston Martin, and they've got a brand
But
new
you built a really nice community of friends from COVID, didn't you?
No, that's a key thing. So they get trapped with me at COVID, and that is this exceptional man, Anhad, great scientist, businessman, and his wife, Nan. And then Lottie, who was 21 at the time, and a man he was just approaching his 70s, me and a couple of other people. And we got stuck over there, and we formed a family because there was nobody else around. We had the best COVID of all time that anybody could possibly hope for. The privilege of space and all that. And then basically, we became a kind of pseudo family, and we hang out together all the time. It's an odd combination, but which works. One old man, and the rest of them are, very young. And it is bliss for me, and they seem to like it as well. But there's another question. around here.
Real posh round here.
And then it feels here like some nice bit of Bristol to remind me of. It's just slightly hilly down there, and you've got the Georgian grandeur of that. Then you've got the dinky Georgian grandeur of Colleton Hill, which is nice cottages, and then you come around here and you see a wonderful combination of sloping off roads. So you've got one kind of Georgian house there, Georgian cottagey stuff there, Georgian cottagey stuff going down there. You've got the spire of whatever it's called over there, and that's Victorian, but it's a nice spire.
So you're going to love Exeter, haven't you? And I think the Hourglass, the pub that we're going to now, is maybe not your favourite anymore. Prospect is up there.
Well, Prospect's better for eating, but this is like, you can look at it from the outside. It's a bloody beautiful. It's probably the prettiest pub in town. It's a bit like some of the nice country pubs, you know, obviously. It's, and it's civilised very. And then I know these people in here now. I went there for the first time the other day. That's got a great view I've never seen before, going down the hill. And if you look down the hill, look at this, and that goes to the water.
Oh, it's lovely hill, isn't it?
I mean, look at it, you know. It's but I've got a very wonderful person lives there in that one, Phil's house. But they're very vertical, and they're all full of staircase. Whereas my place is 80 foot long, no staircase. I would have if you've got the Freud out there, if you don't count, I'll have a single application and a glass of whiskey. Do you want one?
That's very kind of you. Some water as well. There's half the IPL. Is that a single shot or a double?
Yeah, do you want one? It's quite a nice combi. Yes, is the answer.
Double?
Yeah, two. I mean, obviously one in one glass. Yeah. I like mine with a lot more water. So if you do a glass, yeah. How do you like yours? Want some more? Share them with me. I think we can. Do you want to order any food or not bother?
We have a good menu, yeah.
Not bother with it's only drinking.
It's mistreated.
It's an afterthought.
It gets in the way of liquids.
Anything else for you?
Well, you're going to have one, right? And then that's it for the moment. Thanks very much. Cheerio.
So we found ourselves in the Hourglass pad. So we're going to do a bit of filming here. And yeah, I'd like to learn a little bit more about your life in Exeter. So can you share any stories about the people you have met in Exeter and how they've influenced your life?
Yeah, well, it's the best group of friends and best bohemia that I've managed to steal out of life generally. And what happened was April of the beginning of COVID, it was beautiful weather. And we've got this green on the other side, which is railed off, and we had it to ourselves. It's quite a big space. And I didn't know these people, but they just got stuck with me because they lived in the road, right? We never got over. And so it was, I've told you about, well, Anhad and Nan, who are Sikh, and he's a very successful businessman, and now he's got a very interesting business. He's a scientist. He's got a business partner called Tim, who was the youngest professor in the country in any subject, a sort of bona fide genius.
You started talking about the crazy Christmas and Anhad a little bit more, but I was interested in all the people you met in Exeter, and obviously the first people you probably met besides my auntie Amy is Tess and Crispin, and that
when
night
I first
South
got
Avenue.
here, long before I bought Colin, Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that was the connection with Amy in Normandy Street, and then Tess and Crispin in South Avenue, and they all moved away as soon as we got here. You know.
Well, the Taylors didn't, but I wanted to get a sense of the people you met in Exeter, how they've influenced your life.
Yeah.
Any stories along the way?
Well, I mean, the Taylors were the quintessential family going on holiday with, camping and caravanning in.
And we met them before we actually moved to London through those Cornwall holidays because they knew Amy.
Yeah, they knew Amy. Yeah. But I mean, that was the experience of them. For us, was this sort of really lovely family life that we had all ready for us. And then we did these trips, great trips, with all of you lot when you were small, to obviously to Rock and Padstow and that area, and it was, idyllic. It wasn't quite John Betjeman, as he was lucky enough to go there before any houses were there. When John Betjeman went there in the beginning of the last century, he had that place. He had the whole of Rock and Poleseth and everything to himself. There was about 3 or 4 farmhouses. Anyway, we would go there and we had great holidays, and we went to St Ives and we threw the children up in the air and catch them because they were light, and it was light and fluffy and lovely summer holiday things that will stay in the mind forever. And so Tess and Crispin are superb family people. They've really thrived, over the last 20 years. Unlike us, they had to start from scratch, and they were lucky enough to be brought up in them, to have their careers at the beginning of the Blair period, because that was the period. So that was them. And then Amy was the original contact. We went on holiday with Amy, and one unfortunate holiday before we came down here, but just before you were born, where we were waiting for her boyfriend at the time to turn up, and he died on a motorbike. And that was chaos. And that's when that was horrible. But Amy's now pregnant, of course, and we've just been seeing. I haven't seen her for years, and now I'm seeing her again.
And it'd be good to learn a little bit more about actually your experience of obviously having a family, but meeting Mum. But so looking back, what do you think were the most significant turning points in your life, and how did these experiences shape the person you are today?
Well, I mean, obviously meeting Mum, I met Mum, and she looked absolutely amazing. I mean, it was just stunning. She was serious, and I thought, man, I need a bit of serious in my life. I mean, the women I've been hanging out with were like, they were.
Do you remember what year this was then?
Late it was 85, 86. Then she didn't show the slightest interest in me, went off to India, then I met her up again.
But it wasn't the person that you met when you walked into the building nearby, the flats? No. It was soon after that?
It was connections with that house.
Yeah.
And I met her in...
and was she living in that house? Or
no.
She lived in a house quite similar?
She had an amazing place in... housing association. She was paying, I think, something like £10. It wasn't that, but it was some tiny amount of money, sharing it with another bloke in Canterbury Square, in the Great Canterbury Square, where George Orwell and Evelyn Waugh lived, and everybody. And she's on the cheap on the top floor of that. Fantastic place, just round the corner from the shop. Canterbury Square, real history, and she's got it for tuppence eight. Squatting. Not squatting, housing association. Yeah.
And obviously you got on really well, and you had me in 1990, September 1990. So that must have been another significant.
I've mentioned that before.
Turning point in your life.
Yeah. Do you remember I mentioned about her and you in the hospital?
Yes.
That sort of image.
Yeah. So, but more broadly then, were there any other significant turning points in your life? Obviously, we've talked about quite a few of them, but any any other moments in your life you'd like to
generally
bring up?
Or
Yeah,
just
generally. I mean, so we've moved on to this section, which is reflections on life. So if that's not coming to mind straight away, there's another very grandiose big question that if you could pass on one piece of wisdom or advice to your children or grandchildren, what would it be? So you might not have those answers to hand now. We can come back to them.
That second question is quite simple. They've become, the three of them, probably quite substantially wiser than I am now anyway. So that's a redundant question, right? They know things that I didn't know, which is focus, choose one thing to be good at, get the right partner, and if you haven't got the right partner, live on your own. Don't waste time on relationships, because that's a big tragedy. You have a girlfriend and 5 years goes, you should never been together in the first place. You've done a bit of that, but you're over that now. Advice to you is inappropriate, because I am now the simpleton who took, as Philip Larkin says, took years to climb out of his wrong beginnings, right? This is the problem. If you don't have the right family, you waste the first 20 years of your life reorientating yourself to the same position, and then you can start. And so it's so key having a family that's sound, and you can go through your little adolescent period of being bonkers and then immediately get on with life afterwards. And I couldn't do that. My family after 12 were my friends, right? They were my contemporaries. Advice from a 12-year-old isn't all that good, right? You need a grown-up to give you advice. I mean, if you ask a 14-year-old what you should be doing next, you're going to get the wrong answer.
Well, yeah, I think that's very, very humble you not to act as some wise old goat to try and impart some wisdom still, because you have lived life.
It's just ridiculous.
But so instead of asking,
it's a wisdom of recounting your mistakes.
Yeah.
And that's what it's being honest. I'm fairly honest about the absolute fuck up I've made in my life, really.
Well,
it's all worked out well and all that, but it's not.
But you've got countless stories and anecdotes instead to tell. So beyond what I've asked you, are there any stories from your life that you particularly want to be remembered?
Well, I want to remember. There's a hell of, not stories, but just...
You want to be remembered?
Yeah, okay. I might need to come back to that, Will, because, I mean, I think, try me on the others, but I'm going to need a few minutes till the film.
The other one, the next question might be a bit more immediate, your reaction. And that is, how do you feel about the way your life has turned out?
Well, I mean, it's turned out, and the phrase, it's a Shakespeare title, all's well that ends well. Of course. It doesn't really matter if everything's screwed up before. It's like, in tragedy, and philosophically, if you go back to Dante and Aquinas and people like that, tragedy, right, you would think it's a bigger thing in comedy, so you've got tragedy and comedy. But in their worldview, tragedy is contained within something called a divine comedy. La Divina Commedia, it's like, that's the overall reality. And tragedy is just a subset. Well, no, it's inside that, which is truth. And a great release to know that you were ultimately in a grand comedy rather than a tragic situation. So me dying is a tragedy contained within the divine comedy of our family and our lives and our outer lives and the universe and everybody else's lives, and the whole fucking thing is that. That's the ultimate reality, the divine comedy.
So I feel that sort of answers the question.
I think it does, doesn't it?
Well, my follow-up question, which is there anything you would have done differently, or are you satisfied with your journey?
Well, look, I'm listening to a lot of people like Robert Sapolsky at the moment who are determinists, and I've got a great new friend, Juan Carlos, who is a neuroscientist, and he's a determinist in the sense that between genetics and environment, you are sculpted into who you are, and there's no change in you. And the idea that you're making free choices is completely illusory. It's an illusion that you've chosen mackerel pate and I've chosen chicken pate. That's an illusion. We just think we made a decision. It's built into the structure of our lives.
Yeah.
Right? And we need to feel angry about people. We need to do something about, I mean, what he says about criminals is, I mean, yeah, just contain them. That's what you have to do.
Yeah.
Don't get angry about them. Don't start ranting
So,
at them.
well, I'm actually quite interested on this subject.
I bet you are.
Because it's a philosophical point
It's
about...
scientific.
It's scientific and philosophical. It's based in science, because if we live in a world where we only believe that there's purely chemical reactions, it's one atom reacting with another, if we believe that the soul and the mind doesn't exist and that no God exists, then we have to believe in determinism, and we can't... In determinism.
Indeterminate.
No, we have to believe in determinism.
Yeah.
And we have to believe that one chain of events was always going to follow the last chain of events. So really, you don't have any free choice about what you did with your life. So can we truly blame a criminal because they were already going to always going to do
that also?
Yes.
Of course.
I was interested to ask, is that his line of thinking?
Well, he goes far beyond that, because what he does is he says that once you get that your head around the fact you're a mechanical thing, then you have a second reality, which is your consciousness looking down on your mechanical world and being conscious of it, right? And it's got a lot to do with Heidegger and people like that, and phenomenon. I can't say it.
I think there is an allegory that talks exactly about that situation. Yeah.
Is there? Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm at the moment, because obviously the big fear of actually being told you're going to die is that you have this tremendous brick wall you're going to splat into, and it's personal extinction, right? Now, does that, first of all, that's scary, obviously, but secondly, how do you approach that? And do you approach it by finding God in everything, or finding your own God? I mean, it's the God of your brain, I think. So it does come from you. It seems to be coming from outside, and you can. It's very complicated. And I'm only just kind of sorting all that in my head.
Yeah.
But it's a lot to do with it's got everything to do with me being euphoric at the moment. I mean, I'm in the best state of mind I've ever been in by a long way. I'm infantilized around me. I've gone because I don't have to do anything. I've got Janet, and I've got you, and I've got RTD, and I've got my friends, and they do everything. So all I have to do is think. I'm allowed to do 24-hour thinking. So it's not over yet, mate. I'll tell you the result of my thoughts, but I'm going towards an area where I can see that I'm not going to be in any way discouraged by this personal extinction. It's actually going to put the meaning into the thing that comes before, which is your life.
Well, and that's a lovely thing to see, because you are still living reality. And I think when I do go quite philosophical and talk to Caitlin about the multiverse, or determinism, or whatever it might be, which she made a mistake of quizzing me about at the last festival when she fell asleep very rapidly.
I think
living in the real world.
She does, but that's the balance, isn't it? And it's not as if you aren't living in the real world. You're a very practical man. But it's a combination of a great couple like that, which means that you've got the total human being in two people, and you can function like. That's the joy of where you're at, plus the dogs.
So the next question might be similar to asking you about certain stories that I haven't asked you about, but we're moving on to the miscellaneous and anecdotes section of this interview. So can you think of any particularly funny or unusual moments from your life that haven't come up yet? Maybe something from your time in London, Exeter, or elsewhere.
I mean, they escape me at the moment, is the answer. I've been giving you some really good anecdotes. So
Yeah.
they're only three
Well, I'm
to
going to come on to ask you about, are there any inside jokes or quirky habits that you picked up over the years that aren't tied to certain memories? So maybe those 3 questions we can come back.
Yeah, I think
to you.
so. I mean, my brain's getting a bit tired.
Yeah.
And
Well, the last question I can ask,
Yeah.
you can stop filming now if you want as well.
No, just
So,
fire
who are
away.
some of the people aside from family who have had the most significant impact on your life? What did they teach you, and how
Right.
did they influence your life?
Okay, I've got a good one, which I haven't mentioned. So, when I was 12 and on my own, not in a nasty way, but, you know, isolated a bit, no real home. So I got adept very quickly at stealing other people's families. And the main one was this one. It was the doctor's van, right? That took me over. They knew me and they went to the same school as their kids, that kind of thing. And they were my idea of civilization, and they were my deepest regret that I've lost contact with any of them. So it was Dr. Barnes, right? And he was a wonderful kind of old-fashioned GP, right? Very laid back. They lived in a beaten-up, large Victorian house, and he was extremely nice to me. I used to go and watch television with him, and they would talk to me. And I'd come out with all my socialist opinions and all that kind of thing at 16, 18. And then he quietly sort of you know, he knew his history, and then he would talk about the Attlee government. He would talk about what had just happened, and he'd been in the war as a young doctor fixing airmen and that kind of thing. And he was a certain kind of breed that doesn't exist now. You couldn't imagine a GP like this now. They'd be off, and they lived in this house, right? And they just took me over. They took me over, and the wife, right? There were 5 children, but the wife, his wife, was, everybody knew it. He was an intelligent guy, right? The wife was very, very bright. She was much cleverer than anybody else in there, and they always just say, oh, she's, you know. And she had gone to Oxford in the 1930s, right? Exceptionally bright woman, and done, I think, modern languages, certainly could speak German. And she was a brilliant woman. This is an archetype of that period, certain kinds of women, right? They had a brilliant career, right, at Oxford. Her final degree was so good that her tutor had bound her exam results, her BA exam results, right, in vellum. He bound them. That's how good her exam results were. So she was brilliant, right? She got the best first of all time or whatever. Then what does somebody like that do? Nowadays, the world's their oyster, right? But in those days, right, they become a housewife. And a jolly housewife, no resentment, and she was just in the background, always cooking food. So one meal went into the next, and the doctor would come in and out, and we'd sit in the long grass.
I think you mentioned her, and when I was quizzing you about your family so much, she must have had a huge influence.
Big, and I'll tell you what she was like. She's the profile of my favourite authors, who were women, right? Particularly Penelope Fitzgerald. She had a profile like that a bit. So you're brilliant. I told you about that was Penelope Fitzgerald's degree, not the other woman. But that was so. What happens is you have this kind of flash of fame, and then you become a housewife. And what that does to you is you're so bright. Where's all those brains going to go? They're going to go into observing your family. The other. Perfect for a novelist. Men novelists don't do that. What they do is they, largely speaking, they decorate and dramatise their own psyches. So they take their ego and id and all the rest of it out and make them into characters. But a woman like that has spent her whole life. Great thing being with a mother. I mean, what a bigger career than that. But just that, right? And just cooking a lot of fried food for everybody and watching them and being amused by them. Oh, thank you. And we can have, definitely, we want Peggy in particular because she loves.
On this one, I'm just going to delete some of the ones we have which I've uploaded.
Yeah. That'll be the biggest present of all time, Will. That completed thing. I mean,
it was think about
4 hours of, they'll edit it, no doubt, but it'll be edited beautifully.
Okay. Right, I'll come on to next year. So we've just completed all your interviews, and we've got nothing else to talk about because you've lived a very boring life.
I have. And of course, you can tell that it's completely sanitised, and all the bad things I've done and dodgy things are not even, they are suppressed by the chairman, Janet and William.
A veil has gone over them.
A veil, preferably quite a thick veil that you can't see through. So, I want to express my gratitude for spending so much time focusing on me. I focus on me all day long, but it's not other people to do, is it? I mean, nobody gets this kind of treatment in life, do they? Except for, David Attenborough or somebody or whatever, but not your humble ordinary
You've lived
folk.
a very interesting life. There's a lot of people have, but I think you've got a few more stories.
Oh yeah, that's what I have.
Thoughts about those stories?
Well, it's just I think that you brought it all out. Association of ideas. You ask me the question, I answer it, and then the anecdotes come out. There's loads of anecdotes in there. There's more. I mean, Mum was reminding me of one. What was it? Oh, it's the one about this is country life in the 1970s. So we're in a van. There's Miranda, who I used to live with long ago, before and she's got a baby. Right, she's just had. The baby is safely on her lap. Of course, there's no seat belts. It's before. The seatbelt thing, clunk, click every time. So you're free. That, by the way, is fucking Savile, who told us all to put our seatbelts on.
Jimmy Savile.
Jimmy Savile. It was the most successful advert of all time because he just came on. Nobody wanted to use seatbelts, and he just came on and said, clunk, click every time. And the whole country went, all right, and maybe if you want to, abuse me physically as well, that's okay as well, because he was in a kind of cult like Trump is now. And so anyway, we're in there, it's a mid-late 70s, and we're going from my place to the other farm, which was 6 miles away, right? And so we've got the baby and the mother without seatbelts, me without seatbelt driving, and then we happen to have a pig in the back, as you do. It's a small Morris van that we're taking from one place to the other. I suppose a youngish pig, but it's a pig. And then we have an emergency stop, right? And I'm just trying to work it out. The baby, right, ends up perfectly unharmed, facing its mother on the floor, and the pig is trying to climb over into the front with us. And that's it basically, and that's what life was like. We used to, when we transported animals, we put them in the back
to the front.
That's interesting.
Peggy, come on.
Yeah, we put them into the back of this Morris van, and we could get 9 fat lambs in the back of this little van, but unfortunately it was rusted and some of them got their feet, trotters stuck through, through the floor, and take them to market. You know, it was that simple. And that whole and generally I was just thinking there about laughter and stuff, and it's quite rare to just totally, you know, there's an American phrase, he followed through, he laughed so much, you know, that kind of thing. I mean, I've certainly not done that, but it's that kind of you know, there's been times in this room when I've had Anne and all that lot down here, and we're a bit worse for the wear, and then I say something elderly, and I can remember one night down here, we were all laughing and crying with laughter for at least an hour.
What did Anne say that you were born in the 1900s?
Oh no, that's really good, that one. So I did an MA in 18th century studies, and I told him, I said, I did this thing in 18th century studies. So he then went, oh, I see, you know, you went to university in the 18th century, and there's lots of jokes about, you know, the 1790s, and you know, it was a great time for a student and all that kind of nonsense. And so what they brought me was like 14-and-a-half-year-old, what he brought me, you know, humour, like lads club stuff. I mean, we do that as well, but he's infantilised. I mean, not infantilised, he's just there for a serious businessman. He's also 14-and-a-half.
So you've had some funny times in here.
We had, this room has been the site of great hilarity from time to time, and just also quiet days, like having lovely little Lottie and Big Beth around the other day. We just, you know, no, it was really nice. You're pulling a face, I don't know why. It was just Beth. Yeah, but she's tall and she's like, you know, it's not Beth and Lottie, and they were just here, and we just didn't do any laughing. We were just enjoying peaceful evening, and have those sort of contrasts.
Well, we've got some shots.
I don't know why Mum's putting a face over that, because it's, you know.
Well, it's just a funny way of putting it, isn't it, Dad?
I suppose by today's standards, yeah.
And you got a very nice setting where you're sat. I've got you some nice gifts.
Oh!
So we've got you turn.
Can we pass those over and just show the camera?
I'm going to do your Desert Island Dell, but this might be a contender.
This will be the picture to put in front of it, as it were, yeah. Nat Ganella, Hey Little Hen. Why do we all laugh that? Because we were in the car together as a family, laughing and singing, you know, and of course that's one of the classic moments in childhood, isn't it, in family life.
It's a man asking a hen for his dinner, and the hen's...
It's very Second World War, you know, growing your own veg in the front garden, and having chickens, and having to fend off rats to kill the chickens, all that kind of thing.
I like at the end when the chicken starts talking back.
Yes, yeah. And that kind of intimacy and rural, you know, behaviour was part of, you know, what, you know, I was born into. It was still there, you know, people had the allotments, they still do, but people, you know, would really rely on the allotments for their vegetables.
And I got you the Turner print.
Very good.
Of Colleton Crescent, which was
can I hold that up proudly?
Does 1861 sound about right?
No. This is 1910ish.
Oh, is it
right?
Later?
He's kind of, he goes on to the 1840s turn or something like that. And this is very much, you see, that's Georgian, right? It's flat fronted, but everything before 1850 is flat fronted, right? The bay windows and that whole Victorian thing comes in 20 years after she starts her reign. And this is very much... So
this is where you live now. This
is Regency.
This is a picture of Colleton Crescent from the other side of the quay before it was more built upon. I think it was... I think I read that it was based on the Royal Crescent in Bath.
Yeah, but that's hilarious, because if you see that is different. It is a different animal altogether, because it's gigantic. This is provincial grandeur. It's grand in the context of the other flat-fronted Georgian buildings going out that way and to the hourglass. So it's like human scale grandeur. I mean, you go to Bath or to Edinburgh, there's a big one there, and there's ones in London. They are this kind of magnificent thing that you can't really. I mean, people do live there, but not in this intimate way. That it's only 9 houses.
Yeah.
2 of them are businesses, 3 of them are whole houses, and then the other ones are.
Poor Peggy's being distracted by the lights.
By the light.
Yeah. And then this print as well.
Now this is one of the wittiest puns that I've ever heard. It's artist's finest moment, and he's stood outside Exeter Central and just thought, I'm having an existential crisis, which is very, very funny. And also, it's just what you do have when you go into train stations. I had it lots of times, getting there quickly to go to London. You have a quick existential crisis. So it's very witty. Where exactly we're going to put it, we don't know yet, but somewhere where everybody living next to get the joke.
Well, possibly what Clark had every time he made the decision to move back to Exeter from London.
Yeah, tell that story, because that story is quite as fun.
Well, that was the story.
That was the story. He comes here.
He made the decision to move back from London to Exeter.
And leaves his girlfriend.
Through the journey, he realised he'd made the wrong decision, so he's already booking his train back.
He had an existential crisis times 10. Yeah, that's so funny.
Yeah.
So there's that brilliant joke, and and the frames and things. That's so much better quality than the one that we had.
Yeah, Wilco's finest.
Who?
my mate Wilco.
Oh right, he did the framing.
Yeah, he's a good guy. He's a top quality framer.
I know. No. It's a very big skill. You know, we knew those people at framers.
Yes, they're very nice people.
He's pulling my leg, so it's not a character called Wilco.
Well, Wilco's
it's a shop called Wilco.
Is it?
Took over from Woolworths.
Cheap shop.
Cheap. I mean, the thing is, framing, like, you can buy a print like that one up there, and if you want it gallery quality, and that they kind of are, or at least they're a bit deeper. Those ones, aren't they? They cost hundreds now, and those people that Chris and Belinda know,
yes, very nice.
They were framers and they were real craftsmen, and they had all the big artists in London saying, we've got a load of stuff to frame, and they were doing it cheap, of course, I don't know what happened to them. I suppose it's still there.
So we'll do a bit more filming next time down to get your music choices.
Yeah,
and we can always talk a little bit more about your love of music and art and literature.
Well, if you've got time to indulge me like that, I just think we've done about 4 hours plus now this bit, and your editor is going to be key. The whole thing, just to shape it and make it look professional. And make it a proper little podcast.
Next time you might know who wins out of Donald Trump and Kamala Harris.
Oh, that's fine. That's in hand.
Who's your money on?
My money is up. No, not my money. Global money is dependent on Trump losing. They will. They've got the message now that his stock has gone down to virtually nothing. Trump. He's gone completely mad, and he's got his followers that aren't going to budge because they're in the cult. They're in the cult. There are a few of them coming through. Pennsylvania, the Rust Belt, is looking very promising. That's got 16. It has 16 votes, so it's key. The Rust Belt. They still call it the Rust Belt, but they're building factories all over that now. That's the thing. They've actually, doing that thing of building factories, so that's cool. All in hand. I've got that all in hand. Global peace.
You've talked about what it's meant to be a father, have you? And what your children mean to you.
I think it comes out in the dialogue, but you're quite right to say that, and it's all coming home quite undeservedly. The closeness that I'm getting from everybody, It really, people go through phases anyway. They have, like when you're 18, you don't really want to know that much about family life for a year or two.
So you focus on good bits.
I think it all comes. No, there aren't bits. It's a continuum, really. But I think from your point of view, it's classic. When your children get to be 30, they become your friends, and you actually discover them. I mean, very big time.
Monty Don's only just made the cut then.
Well, the point is, you know what I'm saying.
That's true.
You know what I'm saying. I think it's a resolution and it's a new start, and you then go. These people are now more grown up than me, and that's a great way around. And it's been, with Janet, it's got the wand in the background, and she's just been orchestrating this life, particularly now. Obviously, it's just, understatement, ideal, right? It's ideal. Thank you, Janet. This is all we really. We could cut the rest out. I could just go, thank you, Janet, and they would understand that I had that what's going on in my life right now, because I'm you sort of well-off old boy who's been spoilt in life. That I've had plenty of testing bits, but I've had this great privilege of freedom and of, for example, leaving the shop one day because I was fed up with working with Willie and sunny day, and just saying, well, I'm gonna go off for a year or two. Cheerio. I'll take some money out every week, and then going around the corner and discovering that wonderful house that I spent 2 years living in almost immediately. Just knock on a door. I think, whoa, right people, I'm going into this space, and here's my new Bohemia all set up for me. The only connection was with this woman that, what's her name? The one that I thought I was in love with for about 5 minutes before I met you. And she was very bright. She was an Oxford classicist, and I was a bit enamoured with all that stuff. And she wanted a book, right? And I got, you get the numbers so that you can give them the book. And that was the day when I was fed up with the shop. And I thought, well, I'll go and take the book over to her because she lives round the corner, and I'm interested in her. And this is going to be an excuse to go over and meet her. So I go over to this house, 5 Westbourne Road, Park Road, lovely beaten up big house, and I knock on the door, and this is my life. I go from one Bohemia to another. And then create my own at the end of my life. And basically, I knock on the door, somebody answers it in a kind of dressing gown, and I go through the door, and I really don't come out of that door. I do, literally, for 2 years.
Well, this is your life, and to end the interviews, we've invited your sisters to be here.
Yeah, well,
you can come in now.
This is, I can see them there, the twins. And that's a big guilt trip in my life that I didn't, but they did the same to me. It was just too messy and painful, and they really suffered, not like me, because they were, when we came back from the accident, they were messed up.
Do you remember
14-year-old, and I was a 12-year-old, and can you imagine the difference between a 12-year-old boy and 14-year-old girls who are in a different world, much more complicated. They get into terrible problems. One of them has a baby at 16.
No, they're just around the corner.
I'm talking about them because they're not, and because
I know.
God knows whether they're still alive. It's just too much.
Do you remember when Mum called you on April Fool's pretending to be one of them?
Oh yeah, what? That's right. That was. Now that's a good funny moment to end on. I was duped into an enormous guilt trip. And it is the thing that I feel worst about. But, it's too big to open up. It's too, it's just, it would take up too much space in here. And I wish them well if they're still alive. I hope they are. I know they had a very tough time. because it was much easier for me, of course. I was 11, 12, and they were in this totally different world. Girls are 14, they're, you know, often they've got all the problems of...
Did they go on with each other?
Pretty well. Yeah, pretty
So
well.
they had-
But
that was a good support for each other.
Claudia and Julie, and you know, maybe it'd be worth trying. But you know, the trouble is, it's literally opening up this sort of Pandora's box that is not a clever idea, I don't think, for anybody. And however they've got on in life, they've done it without my help. And it would have been quite hard for them. One of them had an awful partner who was a dreadful man, but then, you know, they did have children. They'd have grandchildren now, and they didn't get as much money as me, but they got plenty enough to buy a house, you know. So they probably, you know, not had. They'd probably not had too difficult a time financially, but I wish them well, of course.
Yes. Okay, Dad, I think we can wrap up your interviews there for now.
Thank you for having me. Oh, it's my pleasure. And thank you, Janet. And we didn't look at the other two pictures, did we? But anyway, there we are.
Yeah, you did.
The other two were books.
Yeah, actually, I tell you what, I'm on a picture. And this is my life. You know, I go from one Bohemia to another, and then create my own at the end of my life. And basically, I knock on the door, somebody answers it in a kind of dressing gown, and I go through the door, and I really don't really come out of that door. I do, literally, for 2 years.
Well, this is your life, Dad, and to end the interviews, we've invited your sisters to be here with us today.
Yeah, well,
You can come in now.
This is the, I can see them there, the twins, and that's a big guilt trip in my life that I didn't, but they did the same to me. You know, it was just too messy and painful, and they really suffered, not like me, because they were, when we came back from the accident, they were messed up.
Do you remember
14-year, and I was a 12-year-old, and can you imagine the difference between a 12-year-old boy and 14-year-old girls who are in a different world, much more complicated. They get into terrible problems. One of them has a baby at 16.
Dad, they're just round the corner.
I'm talking about them because they're not, and because
I know.
God knows whether they're still alive. It's just too much.
Do you remember when Mum
reopen.
called you on April Fool's pretending to be one of them?
Oh yeah, what? That's right. That was. Now that's a good funny moment to end on. I was duped into an enormous guilt trip, and it is the thing that I feel worst about. But you know, it's too big to open up. It's too.
Yeah.
It's just, you know, it would take up too much space in here. And I wish them well if they're still alive. I hope they are. I know they had a very tough time because it was much easier for me, of course. I was 11, 12, and they were in this totally different world. Girls are 14. They're, you know, often they've got all the problems of
Did they go on with each other?
pretty well. Yeah, pretty well. But they Claudia and Julie, and you know, maybe it'd be worth trying. But you know, the trouble is, it's literally opening up this sort of Pandora's box that is not a clever idea, I don't think, for anybody. And however they've got on in life, they've done it without my help. And it would have been quite hard for them. One of them had an awful partner who was a dreadful man, but then, you know, they did have children. They'd have grandchildren now, and they didn't get as much money as me, but they got plenty enough to buy a house, you know. So they probably, you know, not had. They'd probably not had too difficult a time financially, but I wish them well, of course.
Yes. Okay, Dad, I think we can wrap up your interviews there for now.
Thank you for having me. Oh, it's my place.
Okay.
And thank you, Janet.